Hello, creatures of darkness, welcome to today's best story. If you're not yet part of our dark community, click the subscribe button now. Leave your like to feed our macabre stories and tell us in the comments which city you're facing your fears from. All because the sun hung low in the sky, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and pink as our convoy of 3 cars wound its way up the mountain road. I sat in the passenger seat of the lead vehicle, a battered old Jeep Cherokee, with my best friend Jake at the wheel. The excitement of our annual camping trip buzzed in the air, mixing with the scent of pine that wafted through the open windows. "Almost there, guys," I called out, my voice crackling through the walkie-talkie to the cars behind us. "Just another mile or so." Jake grinned at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Ready for a week of no cell service bugs and questionable hygiene, Alex?" I laughed, punching him lightly on the shoulder. "You know it. Wouldn't miss it for the world." As we rounded the final bend, the dense forest opened up to reveal a small clearing nestled between towering pines. A collective cheer rose from our group as Jake brought the Jeep to a stop. "Home, sweet home," I murmured, taking in the familiar sight of our campsite. We piled out of the cars, stretching and groaning after the long drive. Our group of 8 friends had been doing this trip for 5 years now, a tradition that started in college and continued even as we began to scatter across the country for jobs and grad school. "All right, people." Sarah, ever the organizer, clapped her hands to get our attention. "You know the drill. Tents up first, then we can relax." We fell into our usual routines, working in pairs to set up our camping gear. I found myself partnered with Mia, the newest addition to our group. She'd joined us last year, bringing a quiet intensity and dry wit that fit perfectly with our dynamic. "So, Mia," I said as we wrestled with tent poles, "ready for your second annual Roughing It experience?" She quirked an eyebrow at me, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Oh, you mean, am I ready for another week of your terrible campfire cooking and Jake's even worse ghost stories?" "Absolutely." I clutched my chest in mock offense. "I'll have you know my s'mores game is unparalleled." As the sun dipped below the tree line, casting long shadows across our campsite, we finished setting up. The smell of wood smoke filled the air as Jake and Tom got the campfire going. I helped Sarah and Lisa unpack the coolers, laying out an array of hot dogs, buns, and various snacks for our first night's dinner. With our bellies full and the stars twinkling overhead, we gathered around the crackling fire. The warmth of the flames and the company of friends created a cocoon of contentment that settled over us all. "All right," Jake said, rubbing his hands together with a mischievous glint in his eye. "Who's ready for some ghost stories?" A chorus of groans and laughs met his question. "Come on, Jake," Tom protested. "Your stories couldn't scare a kindergartner." Jake wagged a finger at him. But this year I've got some new material, guaranteed to give you nightmares." As Jake launched into his tale, I leaned back in my camp chair, letting the familiar cadence of his voice wash over me. The forest around us seemed to grow quieter, as if listening in. A cool breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the earthy scent of the woods. Halfway through Jake's story about a haunted cabin in the woods, a sound cut through the night. A long, mournful howl echoed in the distance, causing all of us to fall silent. "Was that a wolf?" Mia asked, her eyes wide. I frowned, a strange unease settling in my stomach. "I don't think so. We're not really in wolf territory here. Probably just a coyote," Sarah said, but her voice held a note of uncertainty. Jake, never one to miss an opportunity, grinned widely. "Or maybe it's the ghost of the murdered hiker, coming to seek revenge on unsuspecting campers." His attempt at lightening the mood fell flat as another howl pierced the night, closer this time. We all exchanged uneasy glances. "Maybe we should call it a night," Lisa suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. There were murmurs of agreement as we doused the fire and retreated to our tents. As I zipped myself into my sleeping bag, I could hear the others settling in around me. But sleep seemed far away as I lay there, straining my ears for any unusual sounds. Just as I was starting to drift off, another howl shattered the silence. This one sounded different somehow, almost human. A chill ran down my spine and I sat up, my heart pounding. "Did you guys hear that?" I called out softly. "Yeah," came Jake's reply from the tent next to mine. "Weird, right?" "It's probably nothing," Sarah's voice chimed in, but she didn't sound convinced. I lay back down, trying to calm my racing thoughts. It was just an animal, I told myself. Probably a coyote or maybe even someone's dog that had gotten lost in the woods. But no matter how I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the night wore on, the howls continued intermittently. Sometimes they sounded far away, other times alarmingly close. Sleep came in fitful bursts, my dreams filled with shadowy figures and echoing cries. I awoke with a start, unsure of what had disturbed me. The pre-dawn light filtered weakly through the tent fabric, casting everything in a gray hue. For a moment all was quiet. Then I heard it, a soft rustling outside, like something moving through the underbrush. Slowly, careful not to make any noise, I unzipped my tent and peeked out. The campsite was shrouded in mist, giving it an eerie, otherworldly quality. My eyes scanned the area, looking for the source of the sound. There, at the edge of our camp, I saw a flicker of movement. A dark shape, too large to be a coyote, too small to be a bear, slipped between the trees. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw a pair of glowing eyes looking right at me. Then it was gone, melting into the shadows of the forest. My heart hammering in my chest, I quickly zipped the tent back up and burrowed into my sleeping bag. What had I just seen? My mind raced with possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. As the sun finally rose, chasing away the mist and the shadows, I emerged from my tent to find the others already up. The atmosphere was tense, with everyone speaking in hushed tones. "Did anyone else have trouble sleeping?" Tom asked, dark circles under his eyes. There were nods all around. We gathered in a tight circle, clutching mugs of instant coffee like lifelines. "Those howls," Mia said, her voice trembling slightly. "They didn't sound natural." I hesitated for a moment before speaking. I saw something this morning, just before dawn." All eyes turned to me as I recounted what I'd witnessed. As I finished, an uncomfortable silence fell over the group. "Maybe we should pack up and head back," Lisa suggested, voicing what I'm sure many of us were thinking. But Jake shook his head firmly. "No way. We've been planning this trip for months. We're not going to let some weird noises and shadows chase us away." "Jake's right," Sarah added, though she didn't look entirely convinced. "It was probably just our imaginations running wild. We're in the middle of the woods, after all. Strange noises are to be expected." Reluctantly, we agreed to stay. But as I looked around at my friends' uneasy faces, I couldn't shake the feeling that our decision to remain might be one we'd come to regret. The forest suddenly seemed darker, deeper, hiding secrets in its shadowy depths. As we set about making breakfast and planning the day's hike, I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see those glowing eyes watching us from the tree line. Little did I know, our true ordeal was just beginning, and the horrors that awaited us in these ancient woods would test not only our friendship, but our very will to survive. The first rays of sunlight had barely pierced through the dense canopy when I awoke with a start. My heart was racing, remnants of a nightmare clinging to the edges of my consciousness. As I unzipped my tent, the cool morning air hit my face, carrying with it an unsettling stillness. "Hey guys," I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet forest. "Anyone up yet?" A rustling from the tent next to mine preceded Jake's disheveled head popping out. "Yeah, I'm awake. Barely slept a wink with all that howling last night." One by one, the others emerged from their tents, all wearing similar expressions of exhaustion and unease. We gathered around the remnants of last night's campfire, the mood somber as we rekindled the flames for breakfast. Sarah, always the practical one, was the first to break the tension. "All right, let's take stock. Did anyone actually get a good night's sleep?" A chorus of headshakes and murmured negatives answered her question. Those howls, Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. They didn't sound like any animal I've ever heard before. Tom nodded in agreement. Yeah. And did anyone else notice how they seemed to move around the camp? Like whatever was making them was circling us? An uncomfortable silence fell over the group as we contemplated this. I was about to share what I had seen in the early hours of the morning, when a sharp gasp from Lisa cut me off. Guys, she said, her eyes wide with alarm. Look at the campsite. We followed her gaze, and I felt my blood run cold. Our normally tidy camp was in complete disarray. Backpacks had been upended, their contents strewn across the clearing. The coolers lay on their sides, claw marks scoring their plastic surfaces. What the hell? Jake muttered, jumping to his feet. We spread out, surveying the damage. As I approached the edge of our campsite, I noticed something that made my stomach lurch. Tracks, I called out, my voice shaky. There are tracks all around the perimeter. The others rushed over, crowding around me as we examined the ground. The tracks were unlike anything I'd ever seen before. They were large, almost the size of a bear's paw print, but with an unsettling human-like quality to them. This doesn't make any sense, Sarah said, her brow furrowed in confusion. These prints, they're not consistent with any local wildlife. Jake ran a hand through his hair, his earlier bravado replaced by visible concern. Okay, this is getting weird. Maybe we should pack up and head back to civilization. But even as he said it, I could see the curiosity burning in his eyes. It was the same look he got right before suggesting one of his infamous adventures that usually ended with us in some kind of trouble. Or, he continued, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice, we could investigate, figure out what's going on here. Are you insane? Lisa exclaimed. You want to go looking for whatever did this? I found myself nodding slowly, surprising even myself. Jake might be right. We need to know what we're dealing with. If we just pack up and leave, we'll always wonder. After a heated debate, we finally agreed on a plan. We would split into two groups, one to stay and secure the camp, the other to investigate the source of the howls and the strange tracks. Jake, Mia, and I volunteered for the investigation team, while Sarah, Tom, and Lisa stayed behind to clean up the camp and prepare some defenses just in case. As we prepared to head out, Sarah pulled me aside. Alex, be careful out there. Something about this whole situation feels off. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. We will. We'll stay in radio contact and be back before dark, I promise. With a final wave to our friends, Jake, Mia, and I set off into the forest, following the strange tracks. The woods seemed different now, the once friendly trees looming ominously overhead, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. We walked in silence for what felt like hours, the tracks leading us deeper into the forest than we'd ever ventured before. The air grew cooler, and the light dimmed as the canopy thickened above us. Guys, Mia said suddenly, pointing ahead. Look at that. In front of us, partially hidden by a curtain of vines, was the mouth of a cave. The tracks led directly into its dark maw. Jake pulled out his flashlight, its beam barely penetrating the inky blackness. Well, I guess we know where we're going next. As we approached the cave entrance, I noticed something etched into the rock face beside it. Brushing away years of moss and lichen, I revealed a series of primitive paintings. Holy shit, I breathed, tracing the images with my fingertips. The paintings depicted human-like figures with elongated limbs and grotesque, twisted features. They seemed to be hunting, their prey unmistakably human. What is this place? Mia asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, a twig snapped behind us. We whirled around, hearts pounding, but saw nothing but trees and shadows. Did you guys hear that? Jake whispered, his flashlight beam dancing erratically as he scanned the forest. I was about to respond when I realized something that made my blood run cold. Wait, where's Mia? Jake's flashlight beam swung wildly as we both called out for our friend, but only the eerie echo of our own voices answered us. She was right here a second ago, Jake said, panic edging into his voice. She couldn't have just vanished. But she had. In the span of a few heartbeats, Mia had disappeared without a trace. "We need to go back," I said, grabbing Jake's arm. "We need to get the others and come back with more people, more equipment." Jake nodded, his face pale in the dim light. As we turned to leave, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air, echoing through the trees. It was Mia's voice, filled with terror and pain. Without thinking, we plunged into the cave, the beam of Jake's flashlight our only guide in the oppressive darkness. The air grew colder, damper, as we ventured deeper, Mia's screams growing fainter. Suddenly, Jake's flashlight flickered and died, plunging us into total darkness. I felt him grab my arm, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Alex," he whispered, his voice tight with fear. "I think there's something in here with us." As my eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness, I became aware of a presence. Something was moving in the blackness, circling us. The air filled with a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then, in a moment that would haunt my nightmares for years to come, I saw them. A pair of glowing eyes, floating in the darkness, filled with an intelligence and malevolence that was unmistakably alien. "Run!" I screamed, pulling Jake towards what I hoped was the direction of the cave entrance. We stumbled through the darkness, the sound of pursuit close behind us. Just as I thought my lungs would burst, we burst out of the cave into the fading daylight. Without pausing, we ran back towards the camp, branches whipping our faces, roots threatening to trip us at every step. It wasn't until we reached the familiar clearing of our campsite that we finally stopped, collapsing to the ground, gasping for air. What happened?" Sarah asked, rushing to our side. "Where's Mia?" As Jake and I looked at each other, the horrible reality of our situation began to sink in. We had gone into the forest as investigators, curious and perhaps a bit foolhardy. We returned as hunted prey, with one of our own lost to whatever nightmare lurked in those woods. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in hues of red and orange that seemed ominous rather than beautiful. As our friends gathered around us, demanding explanations, I couldn't shake the feeling that our ordeal was far from over. The howls that had so unsettled us the night before were not from wolves, but from something much, much worse. And as darkness fell once again, I knew with chilling certainty that it would be coming for us next. The campfire flickered weakly, casting long shadows across our haggard faces. No one had slept since Jake and I had returned from our ill-fated expedition, and Mia's absence hung over us like a suffocating shroud. The forest around us seemed alive with malevolent energy, every rustle of leaves and crack of a twig setting our nerves on edge. "We need to go after her," Tom said, breaking the tense silence. His voice was hoarse, eyes red-rimmed from a combination of fear and exhaustion. Sarah shook her head vehemently. "No, absolutely not. We've already lost Mia. We can't risk losing anyone else." "So what? We just leave her out there?" Lisa interjected, her voice rising with hysteria. "With that thing?" I rubbed my temples, trying to ward off the headache that had been building since our return. "We don't even know what we're dealing with. Whatever's out there, it's not like anything we've ever encountered before." Jake, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "Alex is right. We're not equipped to handle this. Our best bet is to hike back to the cars at first light and get help." A chorus of arguments erupted, everyone talking over each other in a cacophony of fear and indecision. I was about to intervene when a sound cut through the chaos, silencing us all instantly. It was Mia's voice, distant but clear, calling out from the darkness. "Help! Can anyone hear me? Please help me!" We all jumped to our feet, our eyes scanning the tree line desperately. "Mia?" Tom called back, already moving towards the forest's edge. "Mia, where are you?" "Wait." I grabbed his arm, holding him back. Something felt off. The voice sounded like Mia, but there was an unnatural quality to it, a hollowness that sent chills down my spine. "Let go of me," Tom snarled, trying to wrench his arm free. "That's Mia out there." Jake stepped in, his face grim. "Tom, Think about it. How could Mia have gotten all the way back here on her own? And why would she be calling for help from the forest instead of coming straight to camp? Tom's face fell as the logic of Jake's words sank in. But before anyone could say anything else, Mia's voice called out again, this time from a completely different direction. Please, I'm hurt. I need help. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. It's using her voice, she whispered. Oh God, it's using her voice to lure us out. As if to confirm her words, Mia's cries began to come from all around us, a discordant chorus that seemed to be closing in on our campsite. Everyone, grab a weapon, I ordered, snatching up a heavy branch from our firewood pile. Form a circle, backs to the fire. We huddled together, armed with makeshift clubs and the few camping knives we had brought along. The cries grew louder, more frantic, interspersed now with inhuman howls that made my blood run cold. Suddenly, the noise stopped. The silence that followed was somehow even more terrifying than the cacophony had been. We stood frozen, straining our ears for any sound of approach. That's when I saw it. A shape, darker than the surrounding night, moving at the edge of our campsite. It was vaguely humanoid, but wrong somehow, its proportions subtly off in a way that defied description. There, I shouted, pointing with my makeshift club. As one, we turned to face the threat. The creature stepped into the flickering light of our campfire, and I heard Lisa let out a strangled scream beside me. It was as if someone had taken a human and stretched them, elongating the limbs and torso to grotesque proportions. Its skin was a mottled gray, almost bark-like in texture, but it was the face that truly horrified me. It was Mia's face, but twisted and distorted, plastered onto the creature's skull like a poorly fitting mask. Oh God, Jake whispered beside me. What is that thing? The creature's mouth opened, and Mia's voice emerged, but layered over something deeper, more guttural. Please, help me. Tom let out an anguished cry and lunged forward, swinging his branch wildly. You bastard, what have you done with Mia? The creature moved with impossible speed, dodging Tom's attack effortlessly. In one fluid motion, it grabbed Tom by the throat and lifted him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. Tom, Sarah screamed, rushing forward with her knife raised. What happened next was chaos. We all charged, attacking the creature from all sides. I swung my branch with all my might, feeling it connect solidly with the thing's torso. It let out an inhuman shriek, dropping Tom and whirling to face me. For a moment I found myself staring directly into its eyes. They were Mia's eyes, but behind them I could see something ancient and alien, filled with a hunger that chilled me to my core. Jake's voice cut through my paralysis. Alex, move! I dove to the side just as the creature's elongated arms swiped through the space where I had been standing. Lisa and Sarah were dragging Tom's unconscious form away from the fray, while Jake stood his ground, waving a flaming branch from the fire to keep the monster at bay. We need to run, I shouted, scrambling to my feet. Grab what you can and head for the cars. As if understanding my words, the creature let out another bone-chilling howl. To my horror, answering cries echoed from the forest around us. There were more of them out there. Go, 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 Jake yelled, thrusting his flaming branch at the creature to drive it back. We ran. Abandoning most of our gear, we plunged into the dark forest, guided only by the weak beams of our flashlights. The sounds of pursuit were close behind, branches snapping and undergrowth rustling as our inhuman hunters gave chase. I don't know how long we ran. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the nightmare of that endless night. We stumbled over roots, crashed through bushes, our lungs burning and legs aching. But the terror of what lay behind us drove us ever onward. At some point I realized I could no longer hear the others. The forest around me was silent save for my own ragged breathing and pounding heartbeat. I slowed to a stop, my flashlight beam dancing wildly as I spun in a circle. Jake? I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah? Anyone? Only the quiet of the forest answered me. I was alone. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced it down. I needed to think, to figure out where I was and how to find the others. But as I tried to get my bearings, a twig snapped behind me. I whirled around, my flashlight illuminating a scene straight out of my worst nightmares. The creature stood there, its misshapen form looming over me. But now, instead of Mia's face, it wore Jake's, his features stretched into a grotesque parody of a smile. "Alex," it said in Jake's voice, taking a step towards me. "Why did you leave me behind, Alex?" I stumbled backward, my foot catching on a root. As I fell, my flashlight flew from my hand, plunging me into darkness. I could hear the creature moving closer, its breathing raspy and unnatural. "Stay back!" I yelled, my hand groping blindly for a rock, a stick, anything I could use as a weapon. The creature's laugh, a horrifying blend of Jake's familiar chuckle and something utterly inhuman, sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, Alex," it said, its voice now a twisted mixture of all my friends. "Don't you want to join us?" As my hand closed around a hefty branch, a realization hit me with stunning clarity. This creature, whatever it was, hadn't just taken Mia. It had all of them. Jake, Sarah, Lisa, Tom, they were all gone. And now, alone in the dark forest with this monstrous entity, I knew with chilling certainty that I was next. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped me back to reality. With a surge of desperate energy, I swung my makeshift weapon blindly into the darkness. I felt it connect with something solid, heard a shriek of pain and anger. Not waiting to see the result of my attack, I scrambled to my feet and ran. I ran like I had never run before, branches whipping my face, unseen obstacles tripping me up. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. As I crashed through the underbrush, my mind raced. What were these creatures? How could I hope to survive, let alone save my friends? The horrors of the night had shattered my understanding of reality, leaving me lost in a waking nightmare. But as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, I made a silent vow. I would survive. I would find a way to understand what we were facing. And somehow, some way, I would find my friends and make it out of this forest alive. Little did I know, my ordeal was far from over. The true nature of the threat we faced was beyond my wildest imaginings, and the dawn would bring revelations that would shake me to my very core. The first light of dawn found me huddled in the hollow of an ancient oak tree, my clothes torn and caked with mud, my body trembling from exhaustion and fear. I had run through the night, driven by pure survival instinct, until my legs could carry me no further. Now, as the forest slowly came to life around me, I tried to gather my scattered thoughts. My friends were gone, taken by something. Something that could mimic their voices, their faces. The memory of Jake's distorted features on that creature's face made me shudder. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. As I crawled out of my makeshift shelter, a glint of metal caught my eye. Half buried in the leaf litter was an old, rusted lunchbox. Curiosity overrode caution, and I pried it open. Inside, protected from the elements, was a leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed with age, the handwriting faded but still legible. As I began to read, my heart raced with a mixture of excitement and dread. The journal belonged to a Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, dated some 50 years ago. She had come to these woods to study local folklore, but what she found was beyond anything she could have imagined. I read aloud, my voice hoarse and barely above a whisper. Day 17. The locals speak of a creature they call the mimic. They say it lures its prey by imitating the voices of loved ones. I dismissed it as superstition, but now I'm not so sure. The howls I've heard at night are like nothing I've ever encountered. They sound almost human. My hands shook as I turned the pages, devouring the information. Dr. Hawthorne's entries became increasingly frantic as she delved deeper into her research. Day 23. I've seen it. God help me. I've seen it. The mimic is real, and it's more terrifying than anything the stories prepared me for. It's not just one creature, but many. They're shapeshifters, able to take on the appearance of their victims. But it's more than that. Somehow, they absorb memories, personalities. They become a twisted version of those they've taken. I paused, my mind reeling. This explained the creature with Jake's face, with Mia's voice. They weren't just imitating. They were becoming their victims in some horrifying way. As I continued reading, I found a sketch that made my blood run cold. It depicted a cave entrance, surrounded by primitive paintings. It was the same cave Jake, Mia, and I had discovered. Day 30. The cave paintings tell a story older than humanity itself. The mimics have been here for millennia, preying on humans, shaping our myths and legends. But they're not invincible. The ancient people who made these paintings found a way to fight back. There's a ritual, a way to... The entry cut off abruptly, the rest of the page torn away. I frantically flipped through the remaining pages but found nothing more about the ritual. However, the last entry caught my attention. Final day. If anyone finds this, heed my warning. The mimics cannot be reasoned with, cannot be escaped. They are ancient, patient, and hungry, but they can be fought. Find the cave, complete the ritual. It's our only hope. I closed the journal, my mind racing. The cave. I needed to get back to the cave. But first I had to find my friends, or what was left of them. With renewed determination, I set off through the forest. The journal had given me hope, but it had also confirmed my worst fears. The creatures hunting us were beyond anything I could have imagined. As I made my way through the dense undergrowth, a familiar voice called out, stopping me in my tracks. "Alex? Alex, is that you?" It was Sarah's voice, coming from a small clearing ahead. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I had to know. Cautiously, I approached. Sarah stood in the center of the clearing, her clothes torn and dirty, her eyes wide with relief when she saw me. "Oh, thank God," she said, moving towards me. "I've been looking everywhere for you guys. Where are the others?" I held up a hand, stopping her approach. "Don't come any closer," I warned, my voice trembling. "How do I know you're really Sarah?" She looked confused, hurt even. "What are you talking about, Alex? Of course it's me. We need to find the others and get out of here." I shook my head, backing away slowly. The real Sarah would know what happened last night. She'd know about the creature that attacked us. Sarah tilted her head, a strange smile spreading across her face. When she spoke again, her voice was different, a chilling blend of Sarah's tone and something utterly inhuman. "Oh, Alex," it said, its form beginning to shift and elongate. "You're cleverer than we gave you credit for, but it won't save you. It won't save any of you." I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush as the sound of pursuit filled the air. The creature's laughter echoed through the trees, a sound that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out. When I finally stopped, gasping for air, I found myself at the edge of a small stream. As I splashed water on my face, trying to clear my head, a reflection in the water made me freeze. It was Jake, standing right behind me. But this time I was ready. Without hesitation, I spun around, swinging the heavy journal like a weapon. It connected solidly with the creature's head, sending it stumbling backward. "Where are my friends?" I demanded, brandishing the journal like a shield. "What have you done with them?" The thing wearing Jake's face laughed, a horrible sound that was nothing like my friend's warm chuckle. "Your friends are part of us now, Alex, just as you will be soon." "No," I said, backing away. "I've read about you. I know what you are, and I know you can be stopped." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something like fear in the creature's eyes. "What do you know?" It hissed, all pretense of being Jake gone. I held up the journal. "I know about the cave, about the ritual, and I'm going to use it to destroy you and save my friends." The creature lunged at me with inhuman speed, but I was ready. I dodged to the side, letting it crash into the stream. Without looking back, I ran, my destination clear in my mind. I had to get to the cave. As I ran, my mind raced with questions. What was this ritual? Could it really stop these creatures? And most importantly, was there any hope of saving my friends? Or were they truly gone? The forest seemed to close in around me, every shadow potentially hiding another mimic. But I pressed on, driven by a desperate hope. The journal had given me a purpose, a potential way out of this nightmare. I just had to reach the cave before the creatures caught up with me. Night was falling again by the time I saw the now familiar rock formation ahead. The cave entrance loomed before me, dark and foreboding. As I approached, I could make out the ancient paintings surrounding it, depicting figures locked in eternal struggle with monstrous shapes. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. Whatever this ritual was, whatever horrors awaited me in the depths of that cave, I knew I had no choice. It was my only hope of understanding what we were facing, of potentially saving my friends. With one last look at the darkening forest behind me, I stepped into the cave, the journal clutched tightly to my chest. As the darkness swallowed me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into the belly of the beast itself. Little did I know, the true revelations and the true horrors were yet to come. The answers I sought lay in the depths of that ancient cave, but so did dangers beyond my wildest nightmares. My journey into the heart of the mimic's domain had only just begun, and the night was far from over. The oppressive darkness of the cave enveloped me as I ventured deeper, my flashlight beam barely penetrating the inky blackness. The air was thick with the musty scent of age and decay, and each step echoed ominously off the damp stone walls. Dr. Hawthorne's journal was clutched tightly in my free hand, a lifeline of knowledge in this nightmare. As I rounded a bend, my light fell upon a chamber adorned with more of the primitive artwork I'd seen at the entrance. But these were different, more detailed, and infinitely more disturbing. They depicted humanoid figures transforming, their bodies twisting into grotesque shapes. And at the center of it all was a symbol, a complex, spiraling design that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. "This has to be it," I muttered to myself, my voice sounding small and insignificant in the vast cavern. The ritual must involve this symbol somehow. I was so engrossed in studying the paintings that I almost missed the sound, a faint scraping like claws on stone coming from the tunnel behind me. My heart leaped into my throat as I quickly extinguished my flashlight, plunging myself into total darkness. For a moment, all I could hear was the thundering of my own pulse in my ears. Then, a voice, Jake's voice, called out softly, "Alex, are you in here, buddy? We've been looking everywhere for you." I pressed myself against the cold stone wall, hardly daring to breathe. This wasn't Jake, it couldn't be. But God, it sounded so much like him. "Come on, Alex," the voice continued, closer now. "We're all worried sick. Let's get out of here and go home." Tears pricked at my eyes as I fought against every instinct that screamed at me to run to my friend. But the memory of the creature's twisted version of Jake's face kept me rooted to the spot. Suddenly, another voice joined in. Sarah's this time. "Alex, please, we need you. Something's wrong with this place and we're scared." Their voices, so familiar and yet so wrong, echoed around the chamber. I could hear movement now, the soft shuffle of feet on stone, drawing ever closer to my hiding spot. In a moment of desperation, I fumbled with the journal, flipping pages frantically in the dark until my fingers found what I was looking for. A loose page I'd discovered earlier, covered in what looked like a spell or incantation. With shaking hands, I pulled out my lighter, a tool I'd rarely used on camping trips but now seemed like a godsend. The small flame cast a wavering light over the page, and I began to read aloud, my voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. "By ancient power and elder sign, I call upon the shield divine. Protect me from the shapes that change, from voices false and faces strange." As the last word left my lips, a pulse of energy seemed to emanate from the symbol on the wall. The air around me shimmered, as if a veil had been drawn between me and the rest of the cave. The effect on my pursuers was immediate and terrifying. Inhuman shrieks filled the air, a cacophony of pain and rage that sounded nothing like my friends. In the faint light of my lighter, I saw shapes writhing and twisting, their forms melting and reforming as they tried to breach the invisible barrier now surrounding me. It worked. I breathed, hardly daring to believe it. It actually worked. But my elation was short-lived. The barrier, while keeping the creatures at bay, was also trapping me in the chamber, and I had no idea how long it would last. I turned my attention back to the journal, searching desperately for more information. There had to be something about how to fight these things, how to save my friends. As I pored over the pages, a passage caught my eye. The mimics are not invincible.
They have a weakness: their connection to their victims. If one can reach the true essence of a taken individual, it may be possible to separate them from the mimic's control. I looked up at the writhing shapes beyond my protective barrier, my mind racing. Could it be possible? Could my friends still be in there somewhere, waiting to be rescued? Taking a deep breath, I stepped to the edge of the barrier and called out, "Jake! Sarah! If you can hear me in there, fight it! Remember who you are!"
For a moment, nothing happened. Then one of the shapes stilled, its form solidifying into a more recognizable silhouette.
Alex?"
Jake's voice, strained and distant, but undeniably his, broke through the inhuman noises. What's happening? I can't think straight. Hope surged through me. Jake, it's really you. Listen to me, you have to fight it. Remember who you are. Remember our friendship. I began to recount memories. Our first meeting in college, the road trips we'd taken, the late-night study sessions and inside jokes we shared. With each word, Jake's form became more distinct, more human. But the other creatures were not idle. They clawed at the barrier with renewed fury, their shrieks growing louder and more frenzied. I could feel the protective field weakening under their assault. "Come on, Jake," I pleaded, reaching out towards him even as I felt the barrier beginning to fail. "You can do this. Come back to us." With a final gut-wrenching cry, Jake's form separated from the mass of writhing creatures. He stumbled forward, passing through the weakening barrier and collapsing at my feet. I dropped to my knees beside him, hardly daring to believe it had worked. "Jake, are you okay?" He looked up at me, his eyes clear and familiar. "Alex? What happened?" The last thing I remember is being in the forest, and then darkness. Before I could respond, the barrier shattered with a sound like breaking glass. The remaining creatures surged forward, their forms twisting and changing as they approached. "We need to go now," I shouted, hauling Jake to his feet. We ran deeper into the cave system, the sounds of pursuit close behind us. Jake was weak and disoriented, leaning heavily on me as we navigated the twisting tunnels. "Alex?" he gasped as we ran. "The others? Are they?" I shook my head, not slowing our pace. "I don't know. But if I got you back, there's hope for them too. We just need to figure out how to do it without the protection of that barrier." We emerged into another large chamber, this one dominated by an underground lake. The black water stretched out before us, still as glass and seemingly bottomless. "Dead end," Jake panted, looking around frantically for another exit. But as my flashlight beam played across the cavern, something caught my eye. On the far wall, barely visible above the waterline, was another symbol, similar to the one that had activated the protective barrier, but subtly different. "No," I said, a plan already forming in my mind. "Not a dead end. Maybe our way out." The sounds of the pursuing creatures grew louder, echoing off the stone walls. We were out of time and options. I turned to Jake, gripping his shoulders tightly. "Do you trust me?" He nodded without hesitation, despite the fear evident in his eyes. "With my life." "Good," I said, managing a grim smile. "Because we're going for a swim." Without further explanation, I plunged into the icy black water, pulling Jake with me. The cold was shocking, driving the air from my lungs, but I forced myself to keep moving, swimming towards the symbol on the far wall. Behind us, I could hear the splashes of the creatures entering the water. Their inhuman shrieks were muffled by the water, but no less terrifying. As we neared the symbol, I raised the journal above the water, praying that the pages weren't too soaked to read. By the dim light of my waterlogged flashlight, I began to recite another incantation. Waters dark and waters deep, ancient secrets you must keep. Hide us from the changing faces, guide us to forgotten places. The symbol began to glow with an eerie blue light. The water around us started to churn, and I felt a strong current pulling us towards the wall. "Hold on!" I yelled to Jake, gripping his arm tightly. The last thing I saw before we were pulled under was the twisted forms of our pursuers, their elongated limbs reaching for us across the churning water. Then everything went dark. I don't know how long we were under. It could have been seconds or hours, but when we finally surfaced, gasping and sputtering, we found ourselves in a completely different place. We dragged ourselves onto a rocky shore, coughing up water and shivering uncontrollably. As my vision cleared, I looked around in amazement. We were in a massive cavern, illuminated by bioluminescent fungi that cast everything in a soft, ethereal glow. And there, carved into the wall before us, was a massive version of the spiraling symbol we'd seen throughout the caves. "Where are we?" Jake asked, his voice filled with awe and trepidation. I stood up slowly, my eyes fixed on the symbol. "I think," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "we've just found the heart of the Mimic's domain." As we stood there, dripping and exhausted but alive, I knew that our true battle was only just beginning. Somewhere in this vast underground realm, the rest of our friends were waiting to be saved. And beyond that, the answers to the ancient mystery of the Mimics lay waiting to be uncovered. The hunt had begun in earnest, and I was determined to see it through to the end, whatever the cost. The bioluminescent cavern stretched out before us, its eerie beauty a stark contrast to the horrors we'd just escaped. Jake and I sat on the rocky shore, catching our breath and trying to process everything that had happened. "Alex," Jake said, his voice hoarse, "what were those things? And how did you know how to fight them?" I pulled out Dr. Hawthorne's journal, miraculously still intact despite our underwater journey. "It's a long story," I sighed. "But we've got time. Those creatures are called mimics. They've been here for, well, maybe forever." As I recounted everything I'd learned from the journal, Jake's expression shifted from disbelief to horror to grim determination. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "So," he finally said, "the others, they're still out there? Still possessed?" I nodded solemnly. "But we got you back. That means there's hope for them too. We just need to figure out how to reach them." Jake stood up, his jaw set with resolve. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go find them." His determination was infectious, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We gathered what little we had: the journal, my nearly dead flashlight, and Jake's waterlogged backpack, and set off into the depths of the cavern. As we walked, the bioluminescent fungi gave way to strange, pulsing crystals that seemed to react to our presence. The air grew warmer, heavy with an odd metallic scent. "Alex," Jake said suddenly, stopping in his tracks. "Do you hear that?" I listened intently. At first I heard nothing but the soft hum of the crystals. Then, faintly, I caught it. A voice, calling out in the distance. "Hello? Is anyone there? Please, help me." My heart leaped. That sounds like Sarah. We took off running towards the voice, hope surging through me. As we rounded a corner, we saw her. Sarah, looking disheveled but very much alive, trapped behind a curtain of glowing crystal formations. "Sarah," I called out, relief flooding through me. "Are you okay? We're going to get you out of there." She pressed herself against the crystal barrier, her eyes wide with fear and relief. "Alex. Jake. Oh, thank God. Please hurry. I don't know how long I've been here, but something's wrong with this place." Jake and I began searching for a way to break through the crystal formation. As we worked, I filled Sarah in on what we'd learned about the mimics. "That explains the weird dreams," Sarah said, shuddering. "It was like something was trying to crawl inside my head." Finally, we managed to create an opening large enough for Sarah to squeeze through. As she emerged, I pulled her into a tight hug, overcome with relief at finding another of our friends alive and well. But as I held her, something felt off. A chill ran down my spine, and I slowly pulled away, studying her face carefully. "Sarah," I said cautiously, "what's the name of the campground where we first met?" She blinked, looking confused. "What? Alex, is this really the time for—" "Answer the question," I interrupted, my hand inching towards the journal in my pocket. Sarah's expression flickered, just for a moment, into something alien and angry. Then her face smoothed into a perfect mask of confusion and hurt. "Alex, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I took a step back, positioning myself between the thing that looked like Sarah and Jake. "You're not Sarah," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "The real Sarah would know we met at Willow Creek Campground. It was our first trip together as a group." The creature wearing Sarah's face stood very still for a moment. Then, slowly, a grin spread across its face, too wide, too full of teeth to be human. "Oh, Alex," it said, its voice a chilling mixture of Sarah's and something infinitely older and colder. "You really are clever. It's going to make this so much more enjoyable." Jake let out a strangled gasp behind me. "What the hell?" The thing that wasn't Sarah began to change, its form elongating and twisting in ways that defied physics and sanity. I fumbled for the journal, desperately trying to remember the protective incantation I'd used earlier. But before I could utter a word, the creature lashed out with impossible speed. I felt a searing pain across my chest as its clawed hand raked through my shirt and into flesh. "Run!" I shouted to Jake, shoving him backwards as I stumbled away from the monster's next attack. We took off down the tunnel, the sound of the creature's inhuman laughter echoing behind us. The crystals around us pulsed faster, as if reacting to our fear. "In here!" Jake called, pulling me into a small side passage. We pressed ourselves against the wall, trying to quiet our ragged breathing as the sound of pursuit grew closer. "Did we lose it?" Jake whispered after a moment of tense silence. I was about to respond when a voice, my own voice, called out from the main tunnel. "Jake? Jake, where are you? I got separated from you. Please, I'm hurt. I need help." Jake's eyes widened and I could see the conflict on his face. I gripped his arm tightly, shaking my head in silent warning. The thing using my voice continued, its tone growing more desperate. "Jake, please. I can hear you breathing. Why won't you help me?" Jake squeezed his eyes shut, his whole body tense. I could only imagine how hard it was for him to hear his friend in pain and do nothing. But he held his ground, and eventually the sound of footsteps and my stolen voice faded into the distance. We waited a few more minutes before daring to move. As we emerged from our hiding spot, Jake turned to me, his face pale. How can we fight something like that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It knows us, Alex. It knows exactly how to get to us." I pulled out the journal, flipping through its pages with shaking hands. "There has to be a way," I muttered. "Dr. Hawthorne found something, some kind of ritual or weapon against them. We just need to figure it out." As I searched the journal, a passage caught my eye. "The mimic's greatest strength is also their weakness. They absorb the memories and personalities of those they imitate, but this connection goes both ways. If one can reach the true essence of a taken individual, it may be possible to break the mimic's hold." I looked up at Jake, a glimmer of hope kindling in my chest. "That's how I got you back," I realized. "By reminding you of who you really are, of our shared experiences." Jake nodded slowly, understanding dawning on his face. "So to save the others, we need to remind them of who they really are," I finished. "Force them to reconnect with their true selves." It was a daunting task, made all the more difficult by the fact that we couldn't trust our own senses. Any of our friends could be a mimic in disguise waiting to lure us into a trap. "We need a plan," I said, trying to ignore the throbbing pain from the gash on my chest. "And we need to be smart about this. No splitting up, no matter what we hear or see. Jake nodded grimly. Agreed. And we need some kind of, I don't know, code word or something, so we can be sure it's really us. We spent the next few minutes devising a simple but effective code system, something that relied on shared memories that a mimic, even with absorbed knowledge, would be unlikely to replicate perfectly. As we prepared to venture back into the twisting tunnels of the cavern, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The mimics had been one step ahead of us this entire time. They knew us, knew how to manipulate our emotions and trust. "Jake," I said softly, as we were about to leave our temporary sanctuary, if something happens to me, if I get taken, don't hesitate, okay? Do whatever you have to do to survive and save the others. Jake met my gaze, his expression a mixture of determination and fear that I'm sure mirrored my own. "Same goes for you," he replied. "No matter what happens, we finish this, we get our friends back." With a final nod of agreement, we stepped back into the main tunnel. The hunt had taken on a new dimension now. We were no longer just prey trying to survive. We were hunters ourselves, seeking to reclaim our lost friends from the clutches of an ancient, unknowable evil. As we made our way deeper into the heart of the mimic's domain, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something far bigger and more dangerous than we could possibly imagine. The true nature of these creatures, their origins and their purpose were still shrouded in mystery. But one thing was certain. This cave system held the answers we sought, and we would either uncover the truth or die trying. The path ahead was fraught with deception and danger, but we had no choice but to press on. Our friends' lives, and possibly the fate of the world above, depended on it. The deeper we ventured into the cave system, the more otherworldly our surroundings became. The bioluminescent fungi gave way to strange pulsating crystals that seemed to respond to our presence. The air grew thick with an odd metallic scent that made my head swim. "Alex," Jake whispered, his voice tight with tension, "do you get the feeling we're being watched?" I nodded grimly. The sensation of unseen eyes had been growing stronger with each step we took. "Stay alert," I murmured back. "We don't know what other tricks these mimics might have up their sleeves." As we rounded a bend in the tunnel, we found ourselves in a vast cavern that took our breath away. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet above us, lost in darkness. But it was the walls that captured our attention. Every inch was covered in intricate, primitive artwork. "My God," Jake breathed, his flashlight beam dancing across the ancient paintings. "This is incredible." I pulled out Dr. Hawthorne's journal, flipping through the pages until I found a sketch that matched what we were seeing. "She was here," I said, excitement building in my voice. "This is what she was looking for." We moved closer to the wall, studying the images. They told a story, one that spanned what looked like millennia. The earliest images showed simple stick figures, hunted by shadowy, amorphous shapes. As the story progressed, the human figures became more complex, developing tools and weapons. "Look here," Jake said, pointing to a section of the wall. "It looks like they're fighting back against the shadows." I nodded, my eyes following the narrative. But then, something changed. The next series of images showed the humans and the shadow creatures in what appeared to be some kind of symbiosis. The boundaries between them blurred, creating hybrid forms that were neither fully human nor fully other. "Is this the origin of the mimics?" I wondered aloud, my mind reeling with the implications. Before Jake could respond, a low rumble shook the cavern. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling as the tremor intensified. "Earthquake!" Jake shouted, pulling me away from the wall just as a large chunk of rock crashed down where we had been standing. We stumbled towards the center of the cavern as the shaking grew more violent. Cracks appeared in the floor, spreading like spider webs beneath our feet. Suddenly, with a deafening crack, the ground gave way beneath us. We fell, tumbling through darkness, bouncing off rock walls in a descent that seemed to last forever. Finally, we landed hard on a sandy floor, the impact driving the air from my lungs. For a moment, we lay there gasping and checking for injuries. Miraculously, aside from some cuts and bruises, we seemed to be mostly intact. "Jake?" I called out, my voice hoarse. "You okay?" "Yeah," came his pained reply. "Just give me a minute to remember how to breathe." As we slowly got to our feet, I fumbled for my flashlight. When I finally got it working, the beam revealed a sight that made my heart skip a beat. We were in a small, roughly circular chamber, and every inch of it was covered in symbols, the same spiral design we'd seen throughout the caves, repeated over and over in dizzying patterns. "What is this place?" Jake whispered, his voice filled with awe and a touch of fear. I approached one of the walls, studying the symbols closely. They seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, as if alive. I think," I said slowly, "I think this might be the heart of it all, the source of the mimic's power." As if in response to my words, the symbols began to glow brighter. A low hum filled the air, growing in intensity until it was almost painful. "Alex!" Jake shouted over the noise. "The journal! Check the journal!" I pulled out Dr. Hawthorne's battered notebook, flipping through the pages frantically. There, near the end, was a passage I hadn't noticed before. "The Chamber of Echoes, the nexus point where our world and theirs intersect. It's here that the barrier is thinnest, here that the true nature of the mimics can be understood. But beware, to know them is to risk becoming them." As I read the words aloud, the humming reached a fever pitch. The symbols on the walls began to move, swirling and shifting in mesmerizing patterns. "Alex," Jake said, his voice strained. "Something's happening. I feel strange." I turned to look at him and felt my blood run cold. Jake's form was blurring at the edges, as if he was having trouble maintaining his shape. "Fight it, Jake," I shouted, gripping his shoulders tightly. "Remember who you are." But even as I tried to anchor him, I could feel the same sensation creeping over me. It was as if my very essence was being pulled apart, drawn into the swirling vortex of symbols surrounding us. In that moment of crisis, a memory surfaced, a passage from the journal about the dual nature of the mimic's power. With the last of my strength, I focused on that thought, on the idea that the very thing threatening to unmake us could also be our salvation. "Jake," I gasped, "the symbols, they're not just their power, they're ours too. We need to embrace it, to understand." Jake's eyes met mine, filled with fear but also dawning comprehension. Together, we turned towards the swirling patterns on the walls and, against every instinct screaming at us to run, we opened ourselves to their power. The sensation was indescribable. In an instant, I felt as if my consciousness had expanded to fill the entire cave system. I could sense every tunnel, every chamber. And more than that, I could feel the presence of others, our friends, the mimics, all interconnected in a vast, pulsing network of energy. Images and sensations flooded my mind. The birth of the universe, the first stirrings of life on Earth, the long, patient wait of the mimics as they watched humanity grow and evolve. I saw their first contacts with humans, the fear and worship they inspired, the symbiotic relationship that developed over millennia. And then, abruptly, I was back in my own body, gasping for air, as if I'd been underwater for hours. Beside me, Jake was on his hands and knees, shaking. Did you see?" he panted. I nodded, my mind still reeling from the influx of information. "They're not our enemies, Jake. Not really. They're our potential. Our next step." Jake looked at me, his eyes wide with understanding and a touch of fear. "Evolution," he whispered. "They're what we could become." As the implications of what we'd learned sank in, a new sound reached our ears, voices calling out from above. "Alex, Jake, are you down there?" It was Sarah's voice, followed by Tom's and Lisa's. Our friends had found us, but as relief flooded through me, a new worry took hold. After what we'd just experienced, how could we be sure it was really them? And more importantly, how could we explain what we now knew? Jake met my gaze, and I saw my own conflicted emotions reflected in his eyes. We had uncovered the ancient secret of the mimics, but this knowledge came with a heavy burden. The line between us and them, between friend and foe, had become blurred beyond recognition. As we prepared to climb back up to our friends, I couldn't shake the feeling that our ordeal was far from over. We had gained understanding, but at what cost? And what would we do with this dangerous knowledge? The Chamber of Echoes had shown us the truth, but it was a truth that could either save us or destroy us. As we began our ascent, I silently vowed to find a way to use this knowledge to save our friends and find a balance between our world and that of the mimics. Little did I know, the greatest challenges and the most heart-wrenching decisions still lay ahead of us. The climb back up to our friends was arduous, each handhold and foothold a struggle against exhaustion and the lingering disorientation from our experience in the Chamber of Echoes. As we neared the top, the voices of Sarah, Tom, and Lisa grew louder, their concern palpable. "We're coming," I shouted up, my voice hoarse. Just give us a minute." Jake and I exchanged a loaded glance. The knowledge we now carried felt like a physical weight, a secret too big and dangerous to share carelessly. "What do we tell them?" Jake whispered as we paused to catch our breath. I shook my head, uncertainty gnawing at me. "I don't know. How can we even be sure it's really them?" Before we could decide on a course of action, Sarah's face appeared at the edge of the crevice we were climbing. Her eyes widened with relief. "Oh, thank God! We've been searching everywhere for you two." As they helped us up, I studied their faces intently, looking for any sign that these weren't our real friends. But they seemed genuine, tired, scared, but undeniably themselves. Tom clapped me on the back, his familiar grin a welcome sight. "Man, you guys look like you've been through hell. What happened down there?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to even begin explaining. Jake stepped in, his voice carefully neutral. "It's, complicated. How did you all find us? Last we knew, you were..." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Last we knew, they had been taken by the mimics. Lisa shuddered visibly. "It's all a blur, honestly. We were somewhere else, somewhere dark. But then there was this, I don't know, energy pulse? And suddenly we were ourselves again, back in the caves." Sarah nodded, her brow furrowed. "We've been wandering around for hours trying to find our way out. Then we heard the earthquake and came to investigate." Their story aligned with what we had experienced in the Chamber of Echoes. That pulse of energy must have been when Jake and I connected with the symbols, somehow breaking the mimics' hold on our friends in the process. But even as relief washed over me at having our group reunited, a new worry took root. If we had effected such a large-scale change, the mimics would surely notice, and they wouldn't be happy about it. "We need to move," I said urgently. "It's not safe here. We need to find a way out of these caves." As if in response to my words, a distant shriek echoed through the caverns, a sound of rage and hunger that chilled me to my core. "What was that?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Jake and I shared another look. There was no more time for secrets or hesitation. "Okay, listen carefully," I said, my voice low and intense. "What we're about to tell you is going to sound insane, but I need you to trust us." As quickly and clearly as I could, I explained about the mimics, about Dr. Hawthorne's journal, and about what Jake and I had discovered in the Chamber of Echoes. I left out some of the more mind-bending details, focusing on what they needed to know to survive. When I finished, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then Tom let out a shaky laugh. "You're right. That does sound insane. But after what we've been through, I believe you." Sarah nodded slowly. "It explains so much. The weird dreams, the feeling of being not ourselves." "So what do we do now?" Lisa asked, fear and determination warring in her voice. Before I could answer, another shriek rang out, closer this time. The very air seemed to vibrate with malevolent energy. "Now," Jake said grimly, "we make our stand." We quickly took stock of our resources. Between us, we had 2 flashlights, a few protein bars, Dr. Hawthorne's journal, and a couple of Swiss Army knives. Not exactly an arsenal for facing down ancient shape-shifting entities. "Okay," I said, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Here's the plan. We need to get back to the Chamber of Echoes. It's the heart of their power, but it's also where we might find a way to stop them." "And how exactly do we stop them?" Tom asked skeptically. I hesitated, then decided honesty was our best policy. "I'm not entirely sure, but in the chamber, Jake and I were able to connect with their essence somehow. If we can do that again, maybe we can find a way to communicate, to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Lisa exclaimed. "With those things?" Jake stepped in, his voice calm but firm. "They're not just monsters, Lisa. It's hard to explain, but they're a part of us. A potential future for humanity. We can't just destroy them." Another shriek, so close now that we instinctively huddled together. "Well," Sarah said, her voice shaky but resolute, "standing around here isn't an option. Lead the way, Alex." We set off through the twisting tunnels, guided by the strange sense of direction I'd gained from my experience in the Chamber of Echoes. The sounds of pursuit grew steadily closer, spurring us to move faster despite our exhaustion. As we rounded a corner, we came face to face with our first mimic. It wore the form of a park ranger, but its movements were jerky, inhuman. Its face split into a too-wide grin as it saw us. "Well, well," it said, its voice a chilling blend of human and otherworldly tones. "The wayward children all together again. How convenient." I stepped forward, pushing the others behind me. "We know what you are," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We've seen your true nature. We understand." The mimic's grin widened impossibly further. "Oh, you've seen nothing, little one. You've tasted a drop of the ocean and think you comprehend its depths." It began to change, its form elongating and twisting in ways that defied physics and sanity. The others gasped in horror, but I stood my ground. "We don't want to fight you," I said. "We want to find a way to coexist." The creature paused in its transformation, cocking its now misshapen head. "Coexist? We are your future, your destiny. Why fight the inevitable?" "Because it's our choice to make," Jake said, stepping up beside me. "Humanity's path should be our own." The mimic let out a sound that might have been laughter. "Choice? You know nothing of choice. You are cattle stumbling blindly towards evolution. We are merely the shepherds." With shocking speed it lashed out, its arm elongating into a deadly whip. I dove to the side, feeling the wind of its passage ruffle my hair. "Run!" I shouted, scrambling to my feet. We took off down the tunnel, the sound of the mimic's inhuman laughter echoing behind us. More shrieks answered it, coming from all directions. "They're hurting us," Sarah gasped as we ran. She was right. Every turn we took, every fork in the path, seemed to lead us in a specific direction. And I realized with a sinking feeling that it wasn't towards the Chamber of Echoes. Finally, we burst into a massive cavern, easily the size of a football stadium. Bioluminescent crystals cast an eerie blue light over everything. And there, arranged in a loose circle around us, stood at least a dozen mimics. Some wore the faces of people we knew. Park rangers, other campers we'd seen in the area. Others had abandoned any pretense of humanity, their forms a nightmarish blend of human and otherworldly characteristics. "Welcome," said one, wearing the shape of an elderly man, but with eyes that glowed with ancient malevolence. "We've been expecting you." We huddled together, back to back, as the mimics slowly closed in around us. "Alex," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. "What do we do?" I clutched Dr. Hawthorne's journal tightly, my mind racing. There had to be a way out of this, something we were missing. "You've led us on quite a chase," the elderly mimic continued, its voice filled with cold amusement. Escaped our grasp, uncovered secrets you were never meant to know, and now you speak of coexistence? That's right, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. We've seen what you are, what you offer, but we've also seen the cost. There has to be another way. The mimic's eyes narrowed. Another way? Child, we are the way, the only way. Humanity's destiny has been written since the dawn of time, and we are its authors. As it spoke, I felt a strange resonance building in my chest. The symbols I'd seen in the Chamber of Echoes flashed before my eyes, and suddenly, I understood. No, I said, stepping forward. You're wrong. You're not our authors. You're our potential. A possibility, not a certainty. I held up the journal, my voice growing stronger as I spoke. Humanity's strength isn't in becoming you. It's in our adaptability, our ability to change and grow while still remaining ourselves. The mimics shifted uneasily, their forms flickering as if my words were causing them physical discomfort. You feed on our fear, our doubt, I continued. You offer an easy path to power, to transcendence, but it's a false promise. True evolution comes from within, from facing our challenges and overcoming them on our own terms. As I spoke, I felt something building around us, a kind of energy field pulsing in time with my words. The others must have felt it too, because they straightened, their faces set with newfound determination. You say you're our shepherds? Jake chimed in, his voice ringing with conviction. We don't need shepherds. We need partners. Equals. The elderly mimic snarled, its human facade slipping to reveal something ancient and terrifying beneath. Foolish children, you understand nothing. We offer you godhood and you cling to your primitive humanity? It lunged forward, its form shifting into something that defied description, all teeth and claws and writhing tentacles. But as it reached for us, it hit an invisible barrier. The energy field around us flared brightly, pushing the creature back. What is this? It howled, its voice a blend of rage and fear. I looked down at the journal in my hands, watching in awe as symbols began to appear on its pages, glowing with the same energy that surrounded us. It's choice, I said softly. The power of human will, the very thing you tried to take from us. The other mimics began to close in, their forms twisting and merging into a nightmarish mass, but our protective field held firm. Everyone, join hands, I shouted, a plan forming in my mind. As we linked together, I began to recite the words appearing in the journal. It was no language I recognized, but somehow I knew their meaning, their power. With each word, the energy around us grew stronger. The mimics shrieked and howled, hurling themselves against our barrier in a frenzy of rage and desperation. As I spoke the final word, there was a blinding flash of light and a sound like reality itself tearing apart. For a moment I thought I glimpsed another world, a place of swirling energies and impossible geometries. Then, with a thunderous crack, everything went dark. When my vision cleared, we were alone in the cavern. The mimics were gone, banished back to whatever realm they had come from. But I could still feel their presence, lingering at the edges of reality. Is it over? Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head slowly. Not over, but changed. We've reset the balance, pushed them back, but they're still out there, still a part of us. So what now? Tom asked, looking around warily as if expecting the mimics to reappear at any moment. Now, I said, feeling the weight of our ordeal and the knowledge we'd gained. We find our way out of here, and then we prepare. Prepare for what? Sarah asked. I met each of their eyes in turn, seeing the same mix of exhaustion, fear, and determination that I felt. For whatever comes next. The mimics are a part of our world, a part of our future. We can't ignore them, can't pretend they don't exist. But we've proven that we have the power to choose our own path. As we gathered ourselves and began the long journey back to the surface, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. We had won a battle, but the war, the struggle to define humanity's future, was far from over. But as I looked at my friends, battered but unbowed, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, and we would face them as humans, flawed, fragile, but infinitely adaptable and unbreakably strong. The journey back to the surface was a blur of exhaustion and tension. Every shadow seemed to move, every echo sounded like the return of the mimics, but somehow we made it. As we stumbled out of the cave entrance into the pale light of dawn, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We had survived. We had won. Or so I thought. We had barely taken a dozen steps into the forest when a piercing shriek split the air. It was a sound I had hoped never to hear again, the unmistakable cry of a mimic. "No," Jake whispered, his face pale. "It can't be. We banished them." But even as he spoke, shapes began to emerge from the trees. They wore the forms of forest rangers, hikers, even animals, but their movements were wrong, jerky and unnatural. "Alex," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear, "what do we do?" I clutched Dr. Hawthorne's journal tightly, my mind racing. "I don't know. I thought we'd won." The elderly mimic we had faced in the cavern stepped forward, its human disguise flickering like a bad TV signal. "Oh, child," it said, its voice a chilling blend of amusement and malice. "Did you really think it would be that easy? That you could simply banish us and be done with it?" As it spoke, I felt a strange sensation building in my chest. A pull, an echo of the connection I had felt in the Chamber of Echoes. And suddenly I understood. "We didn't banish you," I said slowly, the realization dawning. We merged with you, didn't we?" The mimic's lips curled into a cold smile. "Very good. You're learning. Yes, in your misguided attempt to save humanity, you've bound us closer than ever. We are a part of you now, more than we ever were before." Horror washed over me as the implications sank in. We hadn't defeated the mimics. We'd given them a direct line to humanity's essence. "No," Tom said, shaking his head in denial. "That's not possible. We fought you. We won." "Did you?" the mimic asked, cocking its head in a mockery of curiosity. "Or did you simply change the rules of the game? You wanted coexistence, little ones. Well, here it is." As if to demonstrate, the mimic's form began to shift. But this time, instead of turning into something monstrous, it became me. A perfect copy, down to the dirt on my clothes and the fear in my eyes. "You see," it said with my voice, "we are you now, and you are us." I felt my friends' eyes on me, saw the doubt and fear creeping into their expressions. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. "You're right," I said, stepping forward. "We are connected now. So let's see just how deep that connection goes." Before anyone could stop me, I closed my eyes and opened myself to the power I had felt in the Chamber of Echoes. The sensation was overwhelming, a flood of memories, emotions, and alien thoughts pouring into my mind. I heard my friends calling my name, felt Jake trying to pull me back. But I pushed forward, delving deeper into the maelstrom of human and mimic consciousness. "Alex, stop!" Sarah cried out. "You don't know what you're doing." But I did know. Somewhere in this swirling chaos of merged minds, there had to be an answer. A way to truly understand the mimics, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to coexist without losing our humanity. As I sank deeper into the shared consciousness, I began to see flashes of the mimics' history. Their origins in the primordial soup of early Earth, their long, patient wait as life evolved. I felt their loneliness, their longing for connection. And I understood. They weren't evil. Not really. They were lost, searching for a way to be part of the world they had watched for so long. "Oh," the mimic wearing my face said softly, a note of surprise in its voice. "You truly are trying to understand us, aren't you?" I opened my eyes, meeting its gaze. Yes, I said, because that's what humans do. We try to understand, to empathize even with those who might harm us. It's our greatest strength. The mimic tilted its head, a flicker of something like curiosity passing over its face. A strength? We have always seen it as a weakness, a flaw to be exploited. Then you've misunderstood us, I said, taking another step forward. Our empathy, our ability to connect with others, it's what's allowed us to survive and thrive, and it's what will allow us to find a way forward now. As I spoke, I felt something shifting in the merged consciousness. The chaos began to settle, forming into distinct streams, human and mimic, separate but intertwined. "What are you doing?" the mimic asked, a note of alarm creeping into its voice. "I'm showing you another way," I said. "A true coexistence, not domination, not assimilation, but partnership." I turned to my friends, seeing the fear and confusion on their faces. "I need your help," I said. "All of you. Open yourselves to the connection, but don't lose yourselves in it. Show them who we are, what makes us human." Jake was the first to step forward, his jaw set with determination. "I'm with you, Alex. Whatever it takes." One by one, the others joined us. I felt their presences in the shared consciousness, bright points of light in the swirling darkness, and as they added their experiences, their emotions, their very essence of humanity, I felt the mimics respond. The forest around us seemed to shimmer and warp as the boundaries between our world and theirs blurred. I saw impossible shapes and colors at the edges of my vision, heard whispers in languages no human throat could produce. This is not what we expected," the lead mimic said, its form flickering between my appearance and something utterly alien. "You are more than we thought." "We all are," I said, feeling a surge of hope. "That's the point. There's more to all of us than any of us realized, but we can learn from each other, grow together." For a long moment, everything hung in the balance. I could feel the mimics' uncertainty, their fear of the unknown warring with their curiosity and longing for connection. Then, slowly, I felt a shift. The oppressive presence of the mimics began to recede, not disappearing entirely, but settling into a more harmonious balance with our human consciousness. "We accept," the lead mimic said, its voice a chorus of human and alien tones. "This partnership you offer, it is intriguing." Relief washed over me, so intense it made my knees weak. But I knew we weren't out of the woods yet, literally or figuratively. "So what happens now?" Lisa asked, her voice shaky but determined. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. "Now we learn. We grow. We find a way to live with this new reality." "And what about the rest of the world?" Tom asked. "Do we just keep this a secret?" I shook my head slowly. "No. The world needs to know. Not everything. Not all at once. But people need to be prepared. The mimics are a part of our world now, for better or worse." The lead mimic, still wearing my face, nodded. "We will withdraw for now. Watch, learn. But we will be here, in the shadows, in the quiet spaces between thoughts. And when the time is right, we will reveal ourselves to your kind." As it spoke, the other mimics began to fade, melting back into the forest until only the leader remained. "Remember, Alex," it said, its form shifting one last time into something that defied description, a swirl of color and light that hurt to look at directly. "This partnership goes both ways. We have opened ourselves to you, as you have to us. The power we offer is yours to use, but it comes with a price. Be careful how you wield it." And with that, it was gone, leaving us alone in the quiet forest. For a moment, none of us spoke, trying to process everything that had happened. Then Jake let out a shaky laugh. "Well," he said, running a hand through his hair, "that's going to be one hell of a story to tell the park rangers when they ask why we missed our checkout time." The absurdity of the statement broke the tension, and we all burst into slightly hysterical laughter. As the laughter died down, I looked at each of my friends in turn, seeing the mix of exhaustion, relief, and lingering fear on their faces. "Thank you," I said softly. "All of you. I couldn't have done this without you." Sarah stepped forward, pulling me into a tight hug. "We're in this together, Alex, whatever comes next." As we gathered our scattered gear and began the long trek back to civilization, I couldn't shake the feeling that our ordeal was far from over. We had averted one crisis, but the challenges ahead, explaining what had happened, preparing the world for the existence of the mimics, learning to live with our new abilities, were daunting. But as I looked at my friends, battered but unbowed, I felt a surge of hope. We had faced the impossible and come out the other side. Whatever the future held, we would face it together. As we walked, I felt the presence of the mimics at the edges of my consciousness, not threatening now but curious, waiting. And I made a silent vow. We would find a way to make this work, to bridge the gap between human and other. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be perfect, but it would be ours. A future shaped by choice, by understanding, and by the uniquely human ability to empathize with the unknown. The forest around us seemed different now, alive in a way I had never noticed before. And as we emerged from the tree line, the world sprawling out before us, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Our sacrifice, the merging of human and mimic, had changed everything. But it had also opened up possibilities beyond our wildest imaginations. The real adventure, I realized, was just beginning. I awoke with a start, my body feeling simultaneously familiar and alien. The forest around me seemed different, more alive, as if I could sense every rustling leaf and scurrying creature. My friends were huddled nearby, their faces a mixture of relief and confusion. "You're awake," Sarah exclaimed, rushing to my side. "We thought we'd lost you." I sat up slowly, trying to process the flood of new sensations and memories. The merge with the creature had left me changed in ways I was only beginning to understand. "What happened?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Is everyone okay?" Mike stepped forward, his brow furrowed with concern. "We're all fine, thanks to you. But what exactly did you do? One moment you were facing that thing, and the next, there was this blinding light. When it faded, you were unconscious, and the creature was gone." I took a deep breath, knowing that the truth would be hard for them to accept. I merged with it. The creature, I mean. I understood its pain, its loneliness. It's been here for centuries, isolated and misunderstood. I offered myself to it, and now I am it, in a way. Silence fell over the group as they struggled to comprehend my words. Sarah was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "What does that mean? Are you still you?" I stood up, feeling a new strength coursing through my veins. I'm still me, but I'm also something more. I can feel the forest, its rhythms and secrets. I understand things now that I never could before. Jake, always the skeptic, crossed his arms. "That's impossible. You can't just merge with some monster and become whatever you're claiming to be." As if in response to his doubt, I felt a surge of energy within me. My form shimmered, briefly taking on the appearance of the creature before settling back into my human shape. The others gasped, taking a step back. "I know it's hard to believe," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reassuring. "But this is real. The creature wasn't evil, just lonely and misunderstood. It's been protecting these woods for longer than we can imagine." Mike approached cautiously, studying me with a mix of awe and fear. "So what happens now? Are you dangerous?" I shook my head, feeling a pang of sadness at the fear in his eyes. "No, I'm not dangerous. At least, not to you or anyone who doesn't threaten the forest. But I can't go back to my old life. I have a responsibility now, a duty to protect this place and its secrets. As I spoke, I could feel the pull of the forest growing stronger. The trees seemed to whisper to me, sharing ancient knowledge and urging me to embrace my new role. Sarah stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "You can't stay here. What about your family? Your future? We came here for a camping trip, not to lose you to some mystical forest guardian role." I reached out and took her hand, feeling the warmth of her humanity. I know this isn't what any of us expected, but I can feel it in my very being. This is what I'm meant to do. I've been given a gift, a chance to protect something truly special. Jake, still skeptical but softening, asked, "But what will you do here? Just wander the woods, scaring campers for eternity?" I couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing through the trees in a way that made my friends shiver slightly. "No, nothing like that. I'll be a guardian, protecting the forest and those who visit it. There are other dangers out there, things that even I'm just beginning to understand. I can keep people safe, guide them away from harm, and preserve the balance of this ancient place." As we talked, I began to pack up our campsite, knowing that it was time for my friends to leave. They helped in silence, the weight of our impending farewell hanging heavy in the air. Once everything was packed, we stood at the edge of the clearing, the moment of goodbye upon us. Sarah threw her arms around me, sobbing, "I can't believe this is happening. Will we ever see you again?" I hugged her back, feeling a mix of sadness and certainty. "I don't know. Maybe someday. But for now, I need you all to go back and live your lives. Tell my family, tell them I found my calling, that I'm happy and doing something important." Mike clapped me on the shoulder, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "We'll miss you, buddy. Take care of yourself out here." Jake, finally seeming to accept the reality of the situation, nodded solemnly. "You always were a bit of a tree hugger. Guess you're taking it to the extreme now, huh?" We shared a final laugh, the sound bittersweet in the morning air. As my friends gathered their gear and prepared to leave, I felt a surge of gratitude for the time we'd shared and the adventures we'd had. "Remember," I called as they started down the trail, "this forest will always be a safe place for you. If you ever need me, just come and call my name. I'll be listening." I watched them disappear into the trees, their forms growing smaller until they vanished from sight. As the sound of their footsteps faded, I turned back to the forest, my new home and domain. Years passed, each day bringing new wonders and challenges. I learned to shapeshift at will, to communicate with the creatures of the forest, and to sense disturbances in the natural order. I watched over campers and hikers, silently guiding them away from danger and ensuring their safety. One crisp autumn evening, as I perched in the branches of an ancient oak, I heard a commotion in the distance. A group of campers had wandered off the main trail, unknowingly heading towards a treacherous ravine. I moved swiftly through the canopy, my form shifting between human and creature as I navigated the dense foliage. As I neared the group, I could hear their panicked voices. "I swear the trail was right here," a young man exclaimed, frustration evident in his tone. "We're lost, aren't we?" A woman replied, fear creeping into her voice. I settled on a branch above them, considering how best to intervene. In the past, I might have used my ability to mimic voices to lure them back to safety, but I had learned that such tactics often caused more fear than help. Instead, I gently rustled the leaves around me, catching their attention. As they looked up, I allowed myself to be partially visible, a shimmer in the air, a suggestion of a human form. "You've wandered from the path," I said softly, my voice carrying on the wind. "Let me guide you back to safety." The campers huddled together, a mix of awe and apprehension on their faces. What are you?" the young man asked. "A friend," I replied simply. "One who knows these woods and wishes to help. Will you trust me?" After a moment of hesitation, the group nodded. I descended from the tree, taking on a more solid human form to put them at ease. As I led them back towards the main trail, I felt a familiar presence in the distance, another energy similar to my own. My heart raced with excitement and curiosity. In all my years as the forest's guardian, I had never encountered another being like myself. Could it be another merged entity, a protector of a different part of the forest? As we reached the safety of the main campground, I bid farewell to the grateful campers. "Remember," I said, echoing the words I had spoken to my friends so long ago, "the forest is alive and aware. Respect it, and it will protect you." With the campers safe, I turned my attention to the presence I had sensed. Moving with inhuman speed, I raced through the forest towards the source of the energy. As I drew closer, I heard a voice, familiar yet otherworldly, calling out. "Hello? Is someone there? Another like me?" I emerged into a moonlit clearing, and there, shimmering between human and creature form, stood another being. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I knew I was no longer alone in my guardianship. A smile spread across my face as I stepped forward. "Hello," I said, my voice carrying centuries of solitude and newfound hope. "I'm the guardian of these woods, and you are?" As the other being began to respond, I felt a sense of completion wash over me. My journey had come full circle, from a carefree camper to a solitary guardian, and now to a kindred spirit. The forest hummed with energy around us as if celebrating the union of its protectors. In that moment, I knew that my sacrifice had been worth it. I had found my purpose, protected countless lives, and now, finally, I had found a companion who could truly understand my existence. As we began to share our stories, I looked forward to the centuries to come, no longer alone in my duty to the ancient woods and its many mysteries. The dense canopy of the forest loomed over us, filtering the afternoon sunlight into a green-tinged haze. My younger brother, Alex, and I had been hiking for hours, our backpacks heavy with camping gear and supplies. We were deep in the heart of the Elderwood Forest, a place we'd visited countless times during our childhood, but never ventured this far into its depths. "Hey, Jake!" Alex called out, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "How much further do you think we should go? My feet are killing me." I paused, wiping sweat from my brow as I consulted our map. "According to this, there should be a clearing about a mile ahead. We can set up camp there." Alex groaned but nodded, adjusting his backpack straps. "Lead the way, bro." We pressed on, the forest growing denser with each step. The air felt heavier, almost oppressive, and an eerie silence had settled around us. No birds chirping, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. As we rounded a bend in the barely visible trail, I stumbled to a halt. There, nestled among ancient trees and overgrown foliage, stood a cabin. It was old and dilapidated, its wooden planks weathered and gray. Vines crept up its sides, nature slowly reclaiming what had once been man-made. Whoa, Alex whispered, coming to stand beside me. Did you know this was here? I shook my head, frowning. No, it's not on any of the maps. This area is supposed to be untouched wilderness. We approached cautiously, our fatigue forgotten in the face of this unexpected discovery. As we drew closer, I noticed strange symbols carved into the trees surrounding the cabin. They were crude but deliberate, forming patterns I couldn't quite decipher. "Jake, look at this," Alex said, pointing to one of the symbols. "What do you think these mean?" I ran my fingers over the rough bark, tracing the outline of a symbol that looked like a twisted eye. "I'm not sure. They could be trail markers or..." I trailed off, not wanting to voice the more unsettling possibilities that came to mind. We reached the cabin's porch, the old wood creaking ominously under our weight. The windows were grimy and cracked, offering no view of the interior. I reached for the door handle, a rusted iron contraption that looked like it hadn't been used in years. "Should we really go in?" Alex asked, a note of apprehension in his voice. "What if someone lives here?" I gestured at the cabin's decrepit state. "Look at this place, Alex. No one's lived here for a long time. Besides, we need shelter for the night, and this beats setting up the tent." Before Alex could protest further, I turned the handle. To my surprise, the door swung open with a long, drawn-out creak. Musty air rushed out, carrying the scent of decay and abandonment. We peered into the gloom, allowing our eyes to adjust to the dim interior. The cabin consisted of one large room, sparsely furnished with what looked like handmade items. A table and chairs stood in one corner, a bed frame in another. Cobwebs draped every surface, and a thick layer of dust covered the floor, except for a set of footprints that led from the door to the center of the room and back. "Jake?" Alex whispered, gripping my arm. "Someone's been here recently." I nodded, my earlier confidence wavering. "Let's check it out, but stay alert." We entered cautiously, our footsteps stirring up dust. I moved towards an old stone fireplace, while Alex investigated a crude bookshelf against the far wall. "Hey, there are some books here," he called out, "but I can't read the titles. They look like they're in some other language." I was about to respond when something caught my eye. There on the floor near the fireplace was a fresh apple core. My blood ran cold as I realized it couldn't have been there for more than a day. "Alex," I said, my voice tight, "come look at this." He joined me, his eyes widening as he saw the apple core. "Oh shit, we should go, Jake. Someone's using this place." I hesitated, torn between the desire to unravel this mystery and the growing sense of unease in the pit of my stomach. "Let's just take a quick look around. If we find any other signs of recent activity, we'll leave immediately." Alex didn't look convinced, but he nodded reluctantly. We split up, searching the cabin for any other clues. I checked under the bed and in a small closet, finding nothing but dust and cobwebs. Alex rummaged through the bookshelf, pulling out tome after tome filled with indecipherable text. As the sun began to set, shadows lengthened inside the cabin, creating an increasingly spooky atmosphere. I was about to suggest we leave when Alex called out again. "Jake, come here, you need to see this." I joined him at the bookshelf where he'd pulled out a particularly thick volume. As he opened it, a folded piece of paper fell out. Alex picked it up and unfolded it, revealing a map of the surrounding forest. Our current location was marked with a red X, and several other spots were circled in the same crimson ink. "What do you think this means?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I studied the map, a chill running down my spine. "I don't know, but I don't like it. We should..." I was cut off by a sound outside, a branch snapping followed by what sounded like whispered voices. Alex and I froze, staring at each other with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Alex nodded, his face pale in the fading light. We crept to the window, peering out into the gathering darkness. At first I saw nothing but trees and shadows. Then, a movement caught my eye. A figure, cloaked and hooded, darted between two trees before disappearing from view. "We need to go," I said, grabbing Alex's arm. "Now." But as we turned to leave, more sounds came from outside. Footsteps, multiple sets, circling the cabin. The whispers grew louder, though I still couldn't make out any words. It was as if they were speaking in a language I'd never heard before. "What do we do?" Alex asked, panic evident in his voice. I looked around the cabin, my mind racing. "We can't leave now. They're out there, whoever they are. We'll have to stay here and hope they don't come in." "Are you crazy?" Alex hissed. "Why, we can't stay here." "We don't have a choice, sir," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Look, we'll barricade the door and windows. If they try to get in, we'll figure something out." We spent the next frantic minutes pushing the heavy table against the door and using the chairs to block the windows. All the while, the whispers outside grew louder, punctuated by what sounded like chanting. As night fell completely, an eerie glow began to filter through the cracks in the barricaded windows. It pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm, casting strange shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Alex and I huddled in the corner farthest from the door, our backs pressed against the rough wooden wall. The chanting outside reached a fever pitch, and the air inside the cabin grew heavy and electric, as if a storm was brewing indoors. "Jake," Alex whispered, his voice shaking. "What's happening?" I wrapped an arm around my little brother's shoulders, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. "I don't know, Alex, but we'll get through this. We always do, right?" As if in response to my words, a loud thump came from the door. The table shuddered but held. Another thump followed, then another. The chanting grew louder, more frenzied. In that moment, as fear threatened to overwhelm me, my eyes fell on the old stone fireplace. There, barely visible in the pulsing light, was a lever I hadn't noticed before. It was hidden in the intricate carvings of the mantelpiece, but now that I'd seen it, I couldn't look away. "Alex," I whispered, nodding towards the fireplace. "I think I found a way out." His eyes followed mine, widening as he spotted the lever. "A secret passage? Like in the movies?" I nodded, a spark of hope igniting in my chest. "It's worth a shot. Ready to find out where it leads?" Alex hesitated for a moment, then set his jaw determinedly. "Ready when you are, bro." As another loud thump shook the door, we crept towards the fireplace. I reached for the lever, my hand trembling slightly. Whatever lay beyond had to be better than what awaited us in this cabin. I pulled the lever, and with a grinding of stone on stone, a section of the floor near the fireplace slid away, revealing a dark passage leading down into the earth. "Ladies first," Alex quipped nervously. I managed a weak chuckle. "Age before beauty, little bro." With one last look at the shuddering door, I lowered myself into the passage, Alex close behind. As we descended into the unknown darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that our discovery of this abandoned cabin was only the beginning of a much larger, more terrifying adventure. The stone slid back into place above us, plunging us into total darkness and muffling the sounds of the chaos we'd left behind. We were safe for now, but as we fumbled our way down the rough-hewn steps, I realized that the true mystery of the cabin in the woods was only just beginning to unfold. The darkness of the secret passage eventually gave way to a faint glimmer of light. Alex and I had been stumbling through the underground tunnel for what felt like hours, our hands brushing against damp stone walls, our footsteps echoing in the narrow space. "Jake," Alex whispered, his voice hoarse from the musty air. "I think I see something ahead." I squinted, trying to make out shapes in the gloom. "Yeah, I see it too. Looks like moonlight." We quickened our pace, hope giving us a second wind. As we rounded a bend in the passage, we found ourselves facing a crude wooden ladder leading up to a trap door. Pale moonlight seeped through the cracks, illuminating our grimy, exhausted faces. "Should we go up?" Alex asked, apprehension clear in his voice. I nodded, trying to project confidence I didn't quite feel. "We can't stay down here forever. Besides, those cultists or whatever they were should be long gone by now." Cautiously, I climbed the ladder and pushed against the trapdoor. It creaked open, revealing the interior of the cabin we'd fled hours earlier. The room was bathed in silvery moonlight streaming through the windows. At first glance, everything seemed as we'd left it. The overturned table, the scattered chairs. But as my eyes adjusted, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. "Alex," I breathed, "you need to see this." My brother clambered up behind me, his sharp intake of breath indicating he'd seen what I had. The walls, previously bare save for a few cobwebs, were now covered in bizarre ritualistic drawings. Swirling patterns, arcane symbols, and unsettling figures danced across every surface, drawn in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. "What the hell happened here?" Alex whispered, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. I shook my head, unable to form a coherent response. Slowly, we made our way further into the room, our eyes darting from one macabre drawing to another. The air felt thick, oppressive, as if the very atmosphere was saturated with malevolent energy. As we reached the center of the room, Alex suddenly yelped, jumping back. "Jake, the floor, it moved!" I looked down, noticing for the first time that we were standing on an old worn rug. The corner had flipped up when Alex stepped on it, revealing a hint of something underneath. Cautiously, I knelt down and pulled the rug aside. "It's a trapdoor," I said, running my hand over the rough wooden surface. A rusted iron ring was set into the center, serving as a handle. Alex grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. "Don't open it, Jake, please. Haven't we had enough creepy surprises for one night?" I hesitated, torn between my brother's fear and my own burning curiosity. "Alex, we need answers. Whatever's going on here, it's bigger than just some squatters in an abandoned cabin. We need to know what we're dealing with." Before he could protest further, I gripped the iron ring and heaved. The trapdoor creaked open, revealing a set of stairs descending into darkness. "I'll go first," I said, pulling out my flashlight. "Stay close behind me, okay?" Alex nodded reluctantly, and together we began our descent into the cellar. The air grew colder with each step, and a musty organic smell assaulted our nostrils. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing rough stone walls lined with shelves. Jars of unidentifiable substances gleamed dully in the light, their contents mercifully obscured by years of dust. "Jake," Alex whispered, pointing to a far corner. "There's something over there." I swung my flashlight in the direction he indicated, illuminating an old wooden desk. Stacks of papers and leather-bound books covered its surface, and seated before it was a chair that looked like it had been recently used. We approached cautiously, our footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. As we drew closer, I saw that the topmost book on the desk was open, its pages covered in dense, handwritten text. "It's a journal," I said, leaning in for a closer look. The handwriting was spidery and difficult to read, but as I skimmed the pages, certain phrases jumped out at me. The summoning, blood of the innocent, thinning of the veil. "What does it say?" Alex asked, peering over my shoulder. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. It's detailing some kind of experiments, supernatural stuff. Listen to this. Day 37. The entity grows stronger with each sacrifice. Soon the barrier between worlds will be weak enough for the Great Crossing. All will be remade in its image. Alex backed away, shaking his head. "This is insane, Jake. We need to get out of here. Call the police or something." "Wait," I said, flipping through more pages. "There's more. It talks about rituals, about harnessing energy from human subjects." I felt sick as I read the clinical descriptions of what could only be described as torture. A sudden noise from upstairs made us both jump. It sounded like something heavy being dragged across the floor. "They're back," Alex whispered, his face pale in the flashlight's beam. I quickly grabbed the journal, stuffing it into my backpack. "We need to hide. There must be another way out of here." We frantically searched the cellar, our hearts pounding in our ears. The sounds from above grew louder, accompanied by muffled voices. Just as panic threatened to overwhelm us, Alex spotted a small, half-hidden door set into the far wall. "There," he hissed, pointing. We rushed over, yanking the door open to reveal a narrow passageway. Without hesitation, we squeezed through, pulling the door shut behind us just as we heard footsteps on the cellar stairs. The passage was tight and claustrophobic, forcing us to move in single file. We stumbled along in the dark, afraid to use the flashlight lest its light be seen through cracks in the wall. After what felt like an eternity, we emerged into the cool night air, finding ourselves at the back of the cabin. We made it, Alex breathed, relief evident in his voice. But our sense of security was short-lived. As we moved away from the cabin, I noticed something odd about our surroundings. "Alex," I said slowly, "does something seem different to you?" He looked around, his brow furrowing. "Yeah, now that you mention it. The trees, they're not the same as before. And look at the ground." I followed his gaze, noticing for the first time that our camping gear was strewn about, looking as if it had been thoroughly searched. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the implications. "They've been through our stuff," I said. "But how? When?" Alex shook his head, bewildered. "I don't know, but I don't like this, Jake. It's like time isn't working right here." As if to punctuate his words, a distant chanting began to echo through the forest. It started soft, barely audible, but grew steadily louder. The voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, speaking in a language that hurt my ears to hear. "We need to go," I said, grabbing Alex's arm. "Now." We took off running, plunging into the dark forest with no clear direction in mind. The chanting followed us, growing louder with each passing moment. Strange lights flickered between the trees, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. As we ran, the world around us began to warp and twist. Trees bent at impossible angles, the ground beneath our feet shifting like quicksand. It was as if reality itself was coming undone. "Jake!" Alex shouted over the increasingly loud chanting. "What's happening?" I shook my head, too out of breath to respond. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of what we were experiencing. The journal in my backpack seemed to burn against my spine, a tangible reminder of the horrors we'd uncovered. Suddenly, Alex skidded to a halt, nearly causing me to crash into him. "Look," he gasped, pointing ahead. There, in a small clearing, stood an ancient stone altar. Symbols similar to those we'd seen in the cabin were carved into its surface, glowing with an otherworldly light. The chanting seemed to emanate from the altar itself, pulsing in time with the glowing symbols. "What is that thing?" Alex asked, his voice barely audible over the noise. Before I could respond, a new sound cut through the chaos. Footsteps, many of them, approaching rapidly from all sides. The cultists had found us. "Alex," I said, gripping my brother's shoulders and looking him in the eye. "Whatever happens, we stick together, okay? We're getting out of this." He nodded, his face a mixture of fear and determination. "Together," he agreed. As the footsteps drew nearer and the chanting reached a fever pitch, we stood our ground, backs to the altar, facing the darkness that threatened to engulf us. The journal's weight in my backpack was a constant reminder of the mysteries we'd uncovered. Mysteries that, I realized with a sinking feeling, we were now irrevocably part of. The first hooded figures emerged from the tree line, their faces hidden in shadow. As they advanced, the world around us continued to warp and twist, reality bending under the weight of whatever forces were at work here. In that moment, standing in the heart of a forest that no longer felt like the one we'd grown up exploring, I knew that our lives had changed forever. The abandoned cabin had been just the beginning. Now, we were about to be plunged into a world of dark rituals, ancient entities, and secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. As the cultists closed in, the altar behind us pulsed with energy, and I steeled myself for whatever was to come. Our ordinary camping trip had turned into something far more terrifying, and I realized with a mix of fear and excitement, far more extraordinary than we could have ever imagined. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Alex and I stood our ground, backs pressed against the ancient stone altar. The chanting had reached a deafening crescendo, and the air crackled with an otherworldly energy that made my skin prickle. From the shadows between the twisted trees, more cloaked figures emerged, their faces hidden beneath deep hoods.
"Jake,"
Alex whispered, his voice trembling.
what do we do?
I gripped his arm, my mind racing for a solution. We need to find a way out of here. Maybe if we... But before I could finish, the nearest cultist raised their arms, and the chanting abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was almost more terrifying than the noise had been. "Brothers and sisters," the cultist intoned, their voice carrying an unnatural resonance. "The interlopers have been found. The prophecy speaks true. The vessels have arrived of their own accord." Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. I felt Alex stiffen beside me. "Vessels?" he hissed. "What are they talking about?" I shook my head, equally confused and alarmed. "I don't know, but I don't like the sound of it." The lead cultist took a step forward, and instinctively, we pressed ourselves harder against the altar. "Come, chosen ones," they said, extending a hand. "Your destiny awaits." "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're just campers who got lost. We don't want any trouble." A low chuckle emanated from beneath the hood. "Oh, but trouble has found you, Jake Armstrong. You and your brother Alex. We've been expecting you for a very long time." A chill ran down my spine. How did they know our names? Alex tugged at my sleeve. "Jake, we need to run. Now." As if on cue, the cultists began to close in, forming a tight circle around us and the altar. Panic surged through me as I realized we were trapped. "This way," I shouted, spotting a small gap between two cultists. I grabbed Alex's hand and we sprinted forward, ducking under outstretched arms and pushing through the crowd. Shouts erupted behind us as we broke free, plunging into the twisted forest. Branches whipped at our faces as we ran, the ground beneath our feet shifting and undulating like a living thing. "Don't look back," I gasped, pulling Alex along. "Just keep running." We crashed through the underbrush, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind us. Strange phosphorescent fungi glowed in the darkness, casting an eerie light that made the forest look like an alien landscape. Suddenly the trees parted, and we found ourselves back at the cabin. It loomed before us, somehow more menacing than before, its windows glowing with an unnatural light. "Inside!" I yelled, dragging Alex towards the door. "We can barricade ourselves in." We burst through the entrance, slamming the door shut behind us. I immediately started pushing the heavy wooden table against it, while Alex grabbed chairs to wedge under the doorknob. "The windows!" he cried, rushing to secure them. As we worked frantically to fortify our position, the cultists' chanting started up again, louder than ever. It seemed to come from all around us, as if the very walls of the cabin were singing that eldritch melody. "What do they want with us?" Alex asked, his face pale in the strange, pulsating light that filtered through the cracks in the barricaded windows. I shook my head, trying to catch my breath. "I don't know, but they seem to think we were expected, like we're part of some kind of prophecy." Alex's eyes widened. "The journal. Jake, what if there's something in there that can explain all this?" I quickly shrugged off my backpack and pulled out the leather-bound book we'd taken from the cellar. As I flipped through the pages, the chanting outside rose to a fever pitch, and the light grew more intense. "Here," I exclaimed, pointing to a passage. "Listen to this. The turning of the age approaches. When the stars align, two brothers will come to the sacred grove. Their blood holds the key to the great crossing." Alex leaned in, his face a mixture of fascination and horror. "It's talking about us? But how? This book looks ancient." Before I could respond, a loud thump shook the door. The table shuddered but held. Another thump followed, then another. "They're trying to break in," Alex cried, backing away from the door. I snapped the journal shut and stuffed it back into my pack. "We need to find another way out. There has to be." My words were cut short as the windows exploded inward, showering us with broken glass. Dark, Writhing shapes began to squeeze through the openings, forming into hooded figures as they entered the cabin. "Jake!" Alex screamed, pointing behind me. I whirled around to see more cultists emerging from the shadows in the corners of the room, as if they were materializing out of thin air. "How is this possible?" I gasped, backing up until I felt Alex's presence behind me. The lead cultist from before stepped forward, lowering their hood to reveal a face that was unsettlingly ordinary. It was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and smile lines, not at all what I'd expected from the leader of an eldritch cult. "Hello, Jake and Alex," she said, her voice gentle but filled with an undercurrent of power. "My name is Evelyn. We've been waiting a very long time for you." "What do you want from us?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Evelyn's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Want? Oh, my dear boys, it's not about what we want. It's about what must be. The stars have aligned, and the time of the great crossing is upon us. You are the key to opening the door." Alex gripped my arm tightly. "We don't want any part of this. Just let us go, please." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Evelyn said, shaking her head sadly. "Your destiny was written long before you were born. The blood that flows through your veins is special. It holds the power to bridge the gap between worlds." As she spoke, the other cultists began a low, rhythmic chant. The air in the cabin grew thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. Strange symbols appeared on the walls, glowing with the same unearthly light we'd seen outside. "You're insane," I said, desperately looking for a way out. "We're just normal kids, there's nothing special about us." Evelyn laughed, the sound sending chills down my spine. "Oh, Jake, if only you knew the truth about your family, about your heritage, but don't worry, all will be revealed in time." Suddenly, the floor beneath our feet began to tremble. The wooden planks creaked and groaned, and to our horror, started to split apart. Dark, writhing tentacles emerged from the gaps, reaching towards us. "The entity awakens," Evelyn cried, her voice filled with rapturous joy. "The crossing begins." Alex and I scrambled back, trying to avoid the grasping tentacles. The cultists' chanting grew louder, more frenzied, and the symbols on the walls pulsed in time with the rhythm. "Jake, what do we do?" Alex shouted over the cacophony. I looked around frantically, searching for anything that might help us. My eyes fell on the fireplace, the same one that had hidden the secret passage we'd used to escape earlier. "The fireplace," I yelled, pointing. "There might be another way out." We made a dash for it, dodging tentacles and cultists alike. I reached the fireplace first, my hands scrabbling over the rough stone, searching for a hidden lever or switch. "Hurry, Jake!" Alex cried, fending off a cultist with a broken chair leg. Just as my hope began to fade, my fingers found a small indentation. I pressed it, and with a grinding of stone on stone, a section of the wall slid away, revealing a dark passage. "Alex, come on!" I shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him towards the opening. We dove into the passage just as a massive tentacle slammed into the spot where we'd been standing. The grinding sound came again, and the stone slid back into place, plunging us into darkness and muffling the sounds of chaos behind us. We stumbled forward, our hands on the damp stone walls, our breath coming in ragged gasps. "Do you think we lost them?" Alex whispered after we'd been moving for what felt like hours. I paused, listening intently. The only sounds were our breathing and the distant drip of water. "I think so. For now, at least." We slumped against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up with us. The adrenaline that had kept us going was starting to wear off, leaving us shaky and drained. "Jake," Alex said, his voice small in the darkness. "What's happening to us? Why us?" I wished I had an answer for him. I wished I could tell him that it was all a bad dream, that we'd wake up in our tent with nothing more to worry about than mosquito bites and damp socks. But the weight of the journal in my backpack and the memory of what we'd just witnessed told me that our normal lives were over. "I don't know, Alex," I said finally, reaching out to squeeze his shoulder. "But we're going to figure it out together, okay? Whatever this is, whatever's going on, we'll face it as a team, just like we always have." He was quiet for a moment. Then I felt him nod in the darkness. Okay. Team Armstrong, right? Despite everything, I felt a smile tug at my lips. That's right. Team Armstrong against the world, or whatever's trying to break into it. As we sat there in the dark, catching our breath and gathering our strength for whatever lay ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The cultists, the entity, the talk of prophecies and crossings. It all pointed to something much bigger and more terrifying than we could imagine. But we were together, and we were alive. For now, that had to be enough. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dark forces were aligning against us, we would face them head on, because that's what the Armstrong brothers do. With a deep breath, I pushed myself to my feet, helping Alex up as well. Come on, little brother. Let's see where this tunnel leads us. And so, with nothing but darkness ahead and the echoes of eldritch horrors behind, we pressed on into the unknown, clinging to each other, and the hope that somehow, some way, we would find our way through this nightmare. The darkness of the tunnel seemed to stretch on endlessly. Alex and I had been moving for what felt like hours, our hands trailing along the damp stone walls, our footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The air was thick and musty, making each breath a struggle. "Jake," Alex whispered, his voice hoarse, "do you think we're going the right way?" I paused, trying to get my bearings in the pitch-black passage. "I'm not sure there is a right way, Alex. We're just going." We pressed on, the silence broken only by our labored breathing and the occasional drip of water from unseen crevices. Just as despair began to creep in, I noticed a faint glimmer ahead. "Alex, look," I exclaimed, pointing. "I think I see light." We quickened our pace, hope giving us a second wind. As we drew closer, the glimmer resolved into a soft, diffuse glow. Finally, we emerged from the tunnel into a vast underground cavern. The sight that greeted us was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. The cavern was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, bathing everything in an eerie blue-green light. But what truly caught our attention was the structure at the center of the cavern. "Is that an altar?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to take my eyes off the massive stone construction. It was similar to the one we'd seen in the forest, but much larger and more elaborate. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, glowing with a faint, pulsing light. "We should check it out," I said, taking a step forward. Alex grabbed my arm. "Are you crazy? After everything that's happened, you want to go poking around some creepy underground altar?" I turned to face him, seeing the fear in his eyes. "Look, I'm scared too. But we need answers, Alex. Whatever's going on, whatever those cultists want with us, it's all connected to this stuff. Maybe we can find something here that will help us understand." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but let's be careful." We approached the altar cautiously, our footsteps echoing in the vast space. As we drew closer, I could make out more details of the carvings. They depicted strange, otherworldly creatures and scenes of what looked like rituals. "Jake," Alex said, pointing to one section of the altar, "doesn't this look familiar?" I leaned in for a closer look. The carving showed two figures, clearly meant to be brothers, standing before a swirling vortex. My blood ran cold as I realized the implications. "It's us," I breathed. This can't be a coincidence." Before Alex could respond, a low rumble shook the cavern. Dust and small stones rained down from above. "What was that?" Alex asked, looking around nervously. The rumbling grew louder, and suddenly the ground beneath our feet began to shift. We stumbled back from the altar as the stone floor started to crack and split. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Alex's arm. We sprinted away from the altar, dodging falling rocks and widening fissures. The cavern was collapsing around us, the bioluminescent light flickering wildly. "There!" Alex yelled, pointing to an opening in the far wall. "Another tunnel!" We made a mad dash for the tunnel entrance, the sound of crashing stone growing deafening behind us. Just as we reached the opening, a massive boulder crashed down, nearly crushing us. That was too close, I gasped as we plunged into the new tunnel. We ran blindly through the darkness, the sounds of destruction fading behind us. After what seemed like an eternity, we emerged into a moonlit forest clearing. Panting heavily, we collapsed onto the soft grass. For a moment, we just lay there, gulping in the fresh night air. "We made it," Alex said, a hint of disbelief in his voice. I sat up, taking in our surroundings. The trees here were different from the twisted, nightmarish ones we'd seen earlier. These looked normal, almost welcoming in the silvery moonlight. "Yeah, but where are we?" I wondered aloud. As if in answer to my question, a twig snapped nearby. We both jumped to our feet, alert and ready to run again if necessary. "Hello?" a voice called out. "Is someone there?" Alex and I exchanged a glance. The voice sounded normal, even friendly, but after everything we'd been through, we weren't taking any chances. "Should we answer?" Alex whispered. I hesitated, then nodded. "We might need help, but be ready to run if anything seems off." Clearing my throat, I called back, "Yes, we're here. We're lost and could use some help." A moment later, an old man emerged from the trees. He was carrying a lantern and had a kind face that immediately put me at ease. "Well, well," he said, smiling. "What are you boys doing out here so late?" "It's a long story," I replied, not sure how much to reveal. "We got separated from our camping group and lost our way." The old man nodded sympathetically. "It's easy to get turned around in these woods. Come on, my cabin's not far from here. You boys look like you could use a hot meal and a place to rest." Alex tugged at my sleeve. "Jake, are you sure about this?" I understood his hesitation, but something about the old man felt genuinely trustworthy. "I think it's okay," I whispered back. "Besides, we don't have many other options right now." We followed the old man through the forest. True to his word, we soon came upon a small, cozy-looking cabin. "Make yourselves at home," he said, ushering us inside. "I'm George, by the way." "I'm Jake, and this is my brother Alex," I replied as we entered the warm, wood-paneled interior. George busied himself in the small kitchen area, while Alex and I sank gratefully into comfortable chairs by the fireplace. "So," George said as he set 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate before us, "want to tell me what really happened out there?" Alex and I exchanged a look. There was something in George's tone that suggested he might know more than he was letting on. Taking a deep breath, I decided to take a chance. "You wouldn't believe us if we told you." George chuckled, settling into a chair across from us. "Try me, boys. I've seen some strange things in these woods over the years." And so, haltingly at first, but then with increasing urgency, we told him everything. The abandoned cabin, the cultists, the strange altar, and our harrowing escape through the underground tunnels. When we finished, George was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "I believe you." "You do?" Alex asked, surprise evident in his voice. George nodded solemnly. "The woods around here have always been different. There are forces at work that most people don't understand. But you boys," he paused, his gaze intense, "you're at the center of something big." "But why us?" I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. "We're nobody special." George leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "That's where you're wrong, Jake. Your family has a long history with the forces that are stirring now. Your parent, they knew more than they let on." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Our parents? What do you mean?" But before George could answer, a loud crash came from outside. We all jumped to our feet as the sound of chanting filled the air. "They found us," Alex whispered, his face pale with fear. George moved quickly, pulling aside a rug to reveal a trapdoor. "Down here, quickly. There's a tunnel that leads to the old church on the hill. You'll be safe there." As Alex scrambled down the ladder, I turned to George. "Come with us." He shook his head, a sad smile on his face. "No, my boy. I'll stay and buy you some time. Go, find the truth about your family. And remember, trust in each other no matter what happens. With a heavy heart, I descended the ladder. George closed the trapdoor above us, plunging us into darkness once again.
Jake?
Alex's voice quavered in the blackness. What now? I reached out, finding his hand and gripping it tightly. We keep going. We find that church and we get to the bottom of all this. Together. As we set off down the tunnel, the sounds of chaos muffled above us. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something far bigger and more dangerous than we could imagine. But with Alex by my side and the mystery of our family's past driving us forward, I knew we had no choice but to face whatever lay ahead. The tunnel stretched before us, dark and foreboding, but also holding the promise of answers. With each step, we moved further from the world we knew and deeper into a realm of ancient secrets and cosmic forces. Our escape had led us not to safety, but to the threshold of an even greater adventure, one that would test our bond as brothers and reveal truths that would change our lives forever. The old church loomed before us, its weathered stone walls bathed in the eerie glow of the moon. Alex and I emerged from the tunnel, our clothes damp and dirty, our nerves frayed from the harrowing journey. The silence that enveloped the hilltop was a stark contrast to the chaos we'd left behind at George's cabin. "Do you think we're safe here?" Alex whispered, his eyes darting nervously around the overgrown churchyard. I squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. "For now, at least. Come on, let's get inside." As we approached the heavy wooden doors, they swung open with a low creak, as if inviting us in. We exchanged a wary glance before stepping into the shadowy interior. The church was a single large room, its vaulted ceiling lost in darkness above. Moonlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the dusty floor. At the far end, behind an ornate altar, stood an imposing figure in long robes. "Welcome, Jake and Alex Armstrong," the figure said, its voice resonating through the empty space. "We've been expecting you." I instinctively pushed Alex behind me, ready to run if necessary. "Who are you? How do you know our names?" The figure stepped forward, lowering its hood to reveal the face of a woman. She was older, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through us. "My name is Alara," she said, her voice softer now. "I am the keeper of this sacred place, and I have watched over your family for generations." Alex peeked out from behind me. "Our family? What do you mean?" Ilara gestured towards the altar. "Come, sit. There is much to explain, and time grows short." Hesitantly, we followed her. As we drew closer to the altar, I noticed strange symbols carved into its surface, similar to those we'd seen in the underground cavern. "The cult leader, Evelyn, she said something about a prophecy," I said as we sat on the worn wooden pews, "about us being vessels for some kind of crossing." Ilara nodded gravely. "Yes, the prophecy. It speaks of two brothers whose blood holds the key to bridging the gap between worlds. But Evelyn and her cult have twisted its meaning for their own dark purposes." "But why us?" Alex asked, his voice small in the vast space. "We're just normal kids." A sad smile played across Alara's face. "Oh, my dear boys, you are far from normal. Your bloodline carries an ancient power, passed down through generations. Your parents knew this, which is why they tried to keep you hidden for so long." I felt a surge of anger at the mention of our parents. If they knew all this, why didn't they tell us? Why leave us unprepared? "They thought they were protecting you," Ilara said gently. "They hoped that by keeping you in the dark, you might live normal lives. But fate, it seems, had other plans." She stood, moving towards one of the stained glass windows. The moonlight illuminated her profile, giving her an otherworldly appearance. "Long ago," she began, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality, "there was a great war between our world and another, a realm of chaos and darkness. Your ancestors were instrumental in sealing the breach between worlds, but at a great cost. The power to open or close this breach was bound to their bloodline." Alex leaned forward, his eyes wide. So we have this power? To open the breach? Ilara turned back to us, her expression grave. Yes, but also the power to seal it permanently. This is what Evelyn and her cult seek to exploit. They believe that by opening the breach, they can usher in a new age of power for themselves. But that's insane, I exclaimed. From what we've seen, opening this breach would be catastrophic. Indeed it would, Ilara agreed. Which is why you must learn to harness your power and complete the sealing ritual before the cult can force open the breach. My head was spinning with all this new information. How are we supposed to do that? We don't know anything about rituals or magic or whatever this is. Ilara approached us, placing a hand on each of our shoulders. The knowledge is within you, passed down through your very blood. You need only learn to access it. Suddenly a loud boom echoed from outside, causing us all to jump. The stained glass windows rattled in their frames. "They've found us," Ilara said, her voice urgent. "We must hurry. Take these." She pressed 2 small, intricately carved stones into our hands. They were warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with an inner light. "These focus stones will help you channel your innate abilities," she explained quickly. "Concentrate on them. Feel the energy flowing through you." Another boom shook the church, closer this time. The doors burst open, and a group of hooded figures rushed in, led by the all-too-familiar form of Evelyn. "How touching," Evelyn sneered, her eyes gleaming with malevolent glee. "The great Ilara, reduced to babysitting. Hand over the boys, old woman. Their destiny lies with us." Ilara stood protectively in front of us, her posture straight and defiant. "Their destiny is their own to choose, Evelyn. You cannot force the prophecy to bend to your will." Evelyn laughed, the sound sending chills down my spine. "Can't I? We'll see about that. Seize them." The cultists surged forward. Ilara raised her hands, and a shimmering barrier sprang into existence between us and the attackers. "Run!" she shouted to us. "Through the back. There's a path that leads to the ancient grove. You'll be safe there." "But what about you?" Alex cried, reluctant to leave her. Ilara gave us a sad smile. "My role in this story is ending. Yours is just beginning. Go, and remember, trust in each other, and in the power that flows through your veins." With heavy hearts, we turned and ran towards the back of the church. I could hear the sounds of a magical battle erupting behind us, crashes, explosions, and cries of pain. We burst out of a small side door into the cool night air. A narrow path led down the hill and into a dense forest. "There," Alex pointed. That must be the path she mentioned. As we ran down the hill, the sounds of conflict from the church grew fainter. The forest loomed before us, dark and foreboding. "Jake," Alex panted as we entered the tree line. "What if we can't do this? What if we're not strong enough?" I grabbed his hand, squeezing it tightly. "We have to be. Ilara believed in us, and so did our parents, even if they didn't tell us everything. We're in this together, little brother." We pressed on through the forest, the focus stones clutched tightly in our free hands. As we ran, I began to feel a strange warmth spreading through my body. It was as if the stone was awakening something deep within me, some long-dormant power that had been there all along. "Alex," I said, slowing our pace. "Do you feel that?" He nodded, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's like I can feel the life of the forest around us. The trees, the animals, everything." I was about to respond when a twig snapped nearby. We froze, listening intently. The forest had gone eerily quiet. "Well, well," a familiar voice drawled. "Looks like the little lambs have lost their way." From behind a large oak tree stepped Evelyn, her robes torn and singed from the battle at the church. Her eyes gleamed with a manic light as she regarded us. "Your protector is gone," she said, a cruel smile playing across her lips. "There's no one left to stand between you and your destiny." I stepped in front of Alex, the focus stone burning hot in my hand. "Our destiny is our own," I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. We won't let you use us to destroy everything. Evelyn's smile widened. Oh, my dear boy, you don't have a choice. She raised her hands, dark energy crackling between her fingers. But before she could unleash her attack, the ground beneath our feet began to tremble. What's happening? Alex cried, clutching my arm. The trembling intensified, and suddenly the earth split open between us and Evelyn. A chasm formed, widening rapidly and forcing Evelyn to stumble back. No! She screamed in frustration. This isn't over. You can't escape your fate. But her words were drowned out by the roar of the earth. Trees toppled into the growing chasm, and we were forced to retreat further into the forest. As we ran, I felt a surge of power course through me. Somehow, I knew that we had caused the earth to split, our latent abilities awakening in the face of danger. We emerged into a small clearing, panting heavily. The sounds of destruction faded behind us, replaced by the normal nighttime sounds of the forest. Did we do that? Alex asked, staring at the focus stone in his hand with a mixture of awe and fear. I nodded, equally stunned. I think so. Ilara was right. We have power. Real power. Alex looked up at me, his expression a mix of determination and uncertainty. So what do we do now? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of our newfound knowledge and abilities settling on my shoulders. We learn, we train, and we figure out how to stop Evelyn and her cult before they can open the breach. As if in response to my words, the focus stones in our hands pulsed with light. The forest around us seemed to come alive, leaves rustling with an unseen energy. Together? Alex asked, holding out his hand. I took it, feeling the power flowing between us. Together. No matter what comes next, we face it as a team. As we stood there in the clearing, the enormity of our task ahead began to sink in. We were no longer just two brothers on a camping trip. We were the heirs to an ancient power, the only ones who could prevent a catastrophe that threatened not just our world, but realms beyond. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. But with each other by our sides and the legacy of our ancestors flowing through our veins, we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Our ordinary lives were over, but an extraordinary journey was just beginning. The forest clearing hummed with an otherworldly energy as Alex and I stood there, our focus stones pulsing rhythmically in our hands. The events of the past few hours swirled in my mind like a surreal dream, but the weight of the stone and the tingling sensation of power coursing through my veins reminded me that this was all too real. Jake, Alex said, his voice trembling slightly, what do we do now? How are we supposed to stop a cult when we barely understand our own abilities? I took a deep breath, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. We start by figuring out how to use these powers. Ilara said the knowledge is in our blood. We just need to access it somehow. As if responding to my words, the forest around us seemed to shift. The moonlight filtering through the canopy took on an ethereal quality, and I could have sworn I heard whispers on the wind. Did you hear that? I asked, looking around. Alex nodded, his eyes wide. It's like the forest is trying to tell us something. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the clearing. We whirled around to see a figure stumbling out of the underbrush. It was a young woman, her clothes torn and dirty, her eyes wild with fear. "Help me!" she gasped, collapsing to her knees. "Please, they're coming!" Alex and I rushed to her side. As I helped her up, I noticed strange markings on her arms, symbols similar to those we'd seen in the underground cavern. "Who's coming?" I asked urgently. "The cult?" She nodded, her breath coming in ragged gasps. They took me. Said I was to be a sacrifice for the summoning. I escaped, but they're right behind me." Alex's face paled. "Summoning? You mean they're trying to open the breach now?" Before the woman could respond, a chorus of chanting voices filled the air. The cultists were close, and they were performing some kind of ritual. "We have to stop them," I said, gripping my focus stone tightly. "But how?" The woman grabbed my arm, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me shiver. "The stones," she said, "they're conduits for your power. Focus on them. Channel your energy through them." I exchanged a glance with Alex. How did she know about our stones? But there was no time to question it now. The chanting was growing louder, and an unnatural wind was starting to whip through the trees. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "Let's give it a try. Together?" Alex nodded, moving to stand beside me. We held our stones out in front of us, closing our eyes and concentrating. I tried to visualize the energy within me, imagining it flowing down my arm and into the stone. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, I felt a warmth spreading from the stone, growing hotter and more intense with each passing second. I opened my eyes to see both our stones glowing brightly, pulsing in unison. "It's working!" Alex exclaimed, a mix of excitement and fear in his voice. The woman stood behind us, her expression unreadable in the strange, pulsating light. "Now," she said, "direct your energy towards the source of the chanting. Visualize a barrier, a wall of force pushing back against their ritual." We did as she instructed, turning to face the direction of the cultists' voices. I pictured a shimmering wall of energy, stretching up into the sky and deep into the earth. Beside me, I could feel Alex doing the same, our powers intertwining and amplifying each other. A shockwave of force burst from our stones, rippling through the forest. The chanting faltered, then resumed with increased intensity. The air crackled with competing energies, and I could feel the strain of maintaining our barrier. "It's not enough," I grunted through gritted teeth. "They're too strong." The woman stepped forward, placing a hand on each of our shoulders. "Remember who you are," she said, her voice taking on an otherworldly resonance. "You are the heirs to an ancient power, the guardians of the boundary between worlds. Embrace your legacy." As she spoke, I felt a surge of energy unlike anything I'd experienced before. Images flashed through my mind, ancestors wielding incredible powers, great battles against forces of darkness, rituals performed in secret groves. The knowledge Alara had spoken of was awakening within us. With renewed determination, Alex and I pushed harder against the cult's ritual. Our barrier strengthened, and I could hear cries of frustration from the cultists as their summoning was disrupted. But just as we thought we were gaining the upper hand, a bone-chilling roar echoed through the forest. The very air seemed to ripple and distort, and a tear appeared in the fabric of reality itself. "No," the woman gasped. "They've managed to create a small breach. Something's coming through." From the tear emerged a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, a creature so alien and horrifying that my mind recoiled at the sight of it. The cultists' chanting reached a fever pitch, and I could hear Evelyn's voice rising above the others. "Behold," she cried, "the harbinger of our new world order. Soon the great old one will follow, and all shall bow before its power." The creature lashed out with its tentacles, uprooting trees and carving great furrows in the earth. Alex and I stumbled back, our concentration broken and our barrier shattered. "What do we do now?" Alex shouted over the chaos. "How can we fight that thing?" I looked down at my focus stone, then back at the horrifying entity that was laying waste to the forest. An idea began to form, crazy and dangerous, but possibly our only hope. "We need to close the breach," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not just block it, but seal it completely." The woman nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Yes, but to do that, you'll need to get close to it. The power required, it could destroy you both." Alex gripped my hand tightly. "We don't have a choice. It's us or the whole world, right?" I squeezed back, drawing strength from my little brother's courage. "Right. Together, then?" We began to move towards the breach, dodging flailing tentacles and debris. The cultists, seeing our approach, tried to intercept us, but the woman who had joined us held them at bay with surprising strength and skill. "Go," she shouted. "I'll hold them off. Seal the breach." As we neared the tear in reality, the pull of the other world became almost overwhelming. Strange visions flashed before my eyes. Alien landscapes, impossible geometries, beings of unimaginable power. "Now, Alex," I yelled, "channel everything you've got into the stones." We thrust our focus stones towards the breach, pouring every ounce of our newly awakened power into them. The stones blazed with blinding light, and I felt as if my very essence was being drawn out of me. The creature roared in defiance, its tentacles lashing out at us, but our combined power formed a protective bubble around us, pushing back against the eldritch horror. Slowly, agonizingly, the edges of the breach began to close. The creature thrashed wildly, desperate to escape back to its own realm before the portal closed completely. With one final titanic effort, Alex and I pushed with everything we had. There was a deafening boom, a flash of light so intense it seared my retinas, and then silence. I found myself lying on the forest floor, every muscle in my body screaming in protest. Beside me, Alex groaned, slowly pushing himself up to a sitting position. "Did we do it?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I looked around. The forest was in shambles, trees uprooted and the ground torn up, but the breach was gone, and with it, the horrifying creature from beyond. "Yeah," I said, a weak smile spreading across my face. "We did it." The woman who had helped us approached, looking battered but triumphant. The remaining cultists were fleeing into the woods, their summoning ritual in ruins. "You've done well," she said, helping us to our feet. "But this is only the beginning. Evelyn and her cult will not give up so easily, and there are other forces at work that you must be prepared to face." As if to emphasize her words, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Storm clouds were gathering, unnatural in their speed and formation. "Who are you really?" I asked, studying her closely. "How do you know so much about all this?" She smiled enigmatically. "A friend, an ally, someone who has watched over your family for generations. But now is not the time for full explanations. You both need rest and training if you're to face the challenges ahead." Alex leaned heavily against me, exhaustion clear on his face. "What challenges? Haven't we done enough?" The woman's expression grew serious. "I'm afraid not. What you've faced tonight is just a small taste of what's to come. The breach may be sealed for now, but the barriers between worlds are weakening. And there are those who would exploit that weakness for their own gain." I felt a mix of fear and excitement coursing through me. Part of me longed for the simple life we'd had just days ago, but another part thrilled at the idea of exploring these newfound powers and uncovering the secrets of our family's legacy. "So what's our next move?" I asked, straightening up and feeling a new sense of purpose. The woman gestured towards a path that seemed to appear out of nowhere, leading deeper into the forest. "We go to a place of safety, a hidden sanctuary where you can learn to master your abilities. The road ahead will be difficult, but you've already proven yourselves capable of extraordinary things." As we set off down the path, the forest seemed to close in behind us, hiding our tracks. The focus stones in our hands hummed with residual energy, a constant reminder of the power we now wielded and the responsibility that came with it. Our ordinary lives were well and truly over, replaced by a destiny larger and more fantastic than we could have ever imagined. But as I walked beside my brother, following our mysterious new ally into an uncertain future, I felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The summoning had been thwarted, but our journey was just beginning. And somehow, I knew that the fate of not just our world, but many worlds, would hinge on what we did next. The hidden sanctuary turned out to be an ancient grove, nestled deep within the heart of the forest. Massive trees, their trunks wider than any I'd ever seen, formed a natural barrier around a clearing bathed in ethereal light. As we stepped into this sacred space, I felt a surge of energy coursing through my body, as if the very air was charged with power. Our mysterious guide, who had finally introduced herself as Lyra, turned to face us. "This is the Grove of Echoes," she said, her voice filled with reverence. It's been a place of power for millennia, and it's here that you'll learn to fully harness your abilities. Alex looked around in awe, his earlier exhaustion seemingly forgotten. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "I can feel something, like the forest is alive and watching us." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The grove seemed to pulse with an ancient, sentient energy. Lyra smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. The grove is indeed alive in a way. It's connected to the very fabric of reality, and it will help amplify your powers as you train. As if on cue, our focus stones began to glow brightly. I felt a tugging sensation, an urge to move towards the center of the clearing. Alex seemed to feel it too, and together we walked to a circular stone platform that I hadn't noticed before. "Now," Lyra said, her tone becoming serious, "we begin your true initiation. The powers you've tapped into so far are just the surface. To truly master your abilities, you must confront the entity that seeks to break through to our world." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You mean we have to face that thing again? The one we banished?" Lyra shook her head. "Not physically. This will be a battle of wills, fought on the mental plane. The entity will try to dominate your minds, to use you as vessels for its entry into our world. You must resist." Alex gripped my hand tightly, fear evident in his eyes. "Jake, I don't know if I can do this. What if I'm not strong enough?" I squeezed his hand reassuringly. "We're in this together, remember? We've already accomplished the impossible. We can do this too." Lyra approached us, placing a hand on each of our shoulders. "Remember, your strength lies not just in your individual abilities, but in your bond as brothers. Use that connection. It's your greatest weapon against the darkness." With that, she stepped back, raising her arms. The air around us began to shimmer, and I felt a strange sensation, as if I was being pulled in all directions at once. The grove faded from view, replaced by a swirling vortex of colors and shapes that defied description. Suddenly, we were somewhere else entirely. It looked like the clearing where we'd first encountered the cultists, but everything was wrong. The trees were twisted and alien, their branches reaching out like grasping hands. The sky above was a roiling mass of darkness, shot through with veins of sickly green light. And there, in the center of it all, was the entity. It was somehow even more horrifying than before, a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes and things I couldn't even begin to describe. Its mere presence felt like a violation of reality. "Jake Armstrong," a voice boomed in my head, so loud it felt like my skull would split. "Alex Armstrong, how kind of you to join us." I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Beside me I could see Alex struggling as well, his face contorted in a silent scream. "Your minds are impressive," the voice continued, dripping with malevolent glee. "Such potential, such power. You will make excellent vessels for my entry into your pitiful world." I felt a pressure building in my mind, an alien presence trying to force its way in. Memories began to flash before my eyes, but they were wrong, twisted. I saw myself and Alex using our powers for destruction, tearing open the veil between worlds and unleashing chaos. "No!" I managed to shout, more with my mind than my voice. "These aren't real. This isn't us." The entity's laughter echoed through the mental landscape. "Oh, but it could be. Embrace your true potential. Let me in, and you'll have power beyond your wildest dreams." I could feel Alex's presence beside me, his mind brushing against mine. He was fighting too, pushing back against the entity's influence, but I could also sense his struggle, the temptation of the power being offered. "Alex," I called out mentally, hoping he could hear me. "Stay with me. Remember who we are, what we're fighting for." The mental plane shifted again, and suddenly we were back in our childhood home. But it was wrong, tainted by the entity's influence. Our parents stood before us, but their eyes were empty, their smiles too wide. "My boys," our mother's voice said, but it wasn't her voice at all. "Why do you resist? We could be together again, a family. All you have to do is let go." I felt Alex's resolve wavering. "Mom," he whispered, his mental voice small and uncertain. "It's not her," I shouted, fighting against the illusion with everything I had. "Alex, remember what Lyra said. Our bond is our strength. Focus on that." With a monumental effort, I reached out mentally, grasping for my brother's consciousness. For a terrifying moment, I couldn't find him in the swirling chaos of the mental plane. Then suddenly I felt him, a familiar presence amidst the madness. As our minds connected, I was flooded with memories. Real memories. Alex and I as kids playing in the backyard, camping trips with our parents, late nights talking about our dreams for the future. The love and trust we shared as brothers cut through the entity's illusions like a blade of pure light. "Impossible," the entity roared, its mental voice shaking the very fabric of the false reality it had created. "You cannot resist me. I am eternal, infinite." But we could resist. Drawing strength from our shared memories and the unbreakable bond between us, Alex and I pushed back against the entity's invasion. The mental landscape began to fracture, shards of the false reality falling away to reveal glimpses of the true grove beyond. "Jake," Alex's voice came through clearly now, strong and determined. "I think I know how to beat this thing. We need to use our powers together, like we did to close the breach." I understood immediately. In this mental battlefield, our focus stones weren't physical objects, but manifestations of our will. I concentrated, visualizing the stone in my hand, feeling its familiar warmth and weight. Alex did the same, and soon we stood side by side, our mental projections of the focus stones blazing with brilliant light. The entity shrieked, its form writhing in apparent pain. "You are nothing," it howled. "Insignificant specks in the vastness of the cosmos." "We may be small," I retorted, my voice ringing with newfound confidence. "But we're not alone, and we will not let you destroy our world." With that, Alex and I thrust our focus stones forward, channeling every ounce of our will and power into them. A beam of pure white light erupted from the stones, piercing through the entity's amorphous form. The mental plane exploded with energy. The entity's shrieks reached a deafening crescendo, and for a moment, I feared we might be torn apart by the backlash. But our connection held firm, our shared will creating a protective bubble around us. And then suddenly, it was over. The chaotic mindscape dissolved, and we found ourselves back in the physical world, standing in the center of the grove of echoes. Alex and I were on our knees, gasping for breath. Our real focus stones clutched tightly in our trembling hands. Lyra stood nearby, a look of pride and amazement on her face. "You did it," she said softly. "You actually did it. I've never seen anyone repel an entity of that magnitude on their first try." I looked at Alex, seeing my own mix of exhaustion and exhilaration mirrored on his face. "We did it," I repeated, barely believing it myself. "But is it over? Is the entity gone for good?" Lyra's expression turned serious. "Not gone, I'm afraid. Beings like that can't be truly destroyed, at least not by any means we know of. But you've dealt it a significant blow. It won't be able to attempt another incursion for some time." Alex slumped against me, the adrenaline clearly wearing off. "So what happens now?" he asked wearily. "Now," Lyra said, helping us to our feet, "you rest and recover. You've taken a huge step forward in your training, but there's still much to learn. The cult is still out there, and there are other threats you'll need to be prepared for." As we made our way to a small cottage on the edge of the grove that Lyra had prepared for us, I couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and apprehension. We'd faced an eldritch horror and come out on top, but it was clear that our journey was far from over. "Hey, Jake," Alex said as we settled into our temporary home, his voice heavy with fatigue but tinged with excitement. "Do you think we'll ever have a normal life again after all this?" I chuckled, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Somehow, little brother, I don't think normal is in the cards for us anymore. But you know what? I'm okay with that. As long as we're in this together, we can handle whatever comes our way. As we drifted off to sleep, our focus stones pulsing gently on the nightstand between our beds, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever battles we'd have to fight, we'd face them as we had faced the entity, together, drawing strength from the unbreakable bond we shared as brothers. The battle of wills was won, but the war for the fate of our world, and perhaps many worlds, was just beginning. And we, Jake and Alex Armstrong, once ordinary brothers on a camping trip, now found ourselves at the very center of it all. Days turned into weeks as Alex and I trained in the Grove of Echoes. Under Lyra's guidance, we honed our abilities, learning to manipulate the energies that flowed through our bloodline. The focus stones became extensions of ourselves, conduits for powers we were only beginning to understand. One crisp morning, as golden sunlight filtered through the ancient trees, Lyra called us to the center of the grove. Her expression was grave, and I felt a sense of foreboding settle over me. "Jake, Alex," she began, her voice solemn. "You've made remarkable progress, but I fear our time here is coming to an end. The cult has been busy while you've been training." Alex tensed beside me. "What do you mean? What have they done?" Lyra waved her hand, and the air before us shimmered. An image formed, showing a familiar clearing, the site of our first encounter with the entity. But now it was transformed. A massive stone structure dominated the space, dark energy crackling around it. "They've constructed a portal," Lyra explained. "A gateway designed to break through the barriers between worlds. If they succeed in activating it, the entity will be able to enter our world fully." I finished, a chill running down my spine. Lyra nodded grimly. "Exactly. And not just the entity we faced. Others, even more powerful and malevolent, wait beyond the veil. If that portal opens, our world is doomed." Alex's face paled, but his jaw was set with determination. "So we stop them. We've gotten stronger. We can do this, right, Jake?" I wished I could share his confidence, but something in Lyra's expression made my heart sink. "There's more to it, isn't there?" I asked her. She sighed heavily. "I'm afraid so. Closing a portal of that magnitude, it will require more than just your combined powers. It will demand a sacrifice." The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. "What kind of sacrifice?" I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. Lyra's eyes met mine, filled with sorrow and compassion. "A life force, specifically the life force of someone with your bloodline. One of you would need to channel all of your energy into closing the portal. The strain would be fatal." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath my feet. Alex's hand found mine, gripping it tightly. "No," he said, his voice shaking. "There has to be another way. I can't lose Jake." I squeezed his hand back, my mind reeling. "Is there truly no other option?" I asked Lyra. She shook her head sadly. "I've searched every ancient text, consulted with beings older than time itself. The power required to seal a breach of this magnitude can only come from a willing sacrifice of your bloodline. I'm sorry. I wish there was another way." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew I had to do. "Then it has to be me. I'll do it." "Jake, no!" Alex cried, his eyes filling with tears. "You can't. I won't let you." I turned to face my little brother, placing my hands on his shoulders. "Alex, listen to me. You're stronger than you know. You've got so much potential, so much life ahead of you. It has to be me." Alex shook his head vehemently. "No, it doesn't. I could do it. I'm not a kid anymore, Jake. You don't always have to protect me." "That's exactly why it needs to be me," I said softly. "Because I'll always protect you. It's my job as your big brother." Lyra cleared her throat, interrupting our argument. "I'm afraid we don't have much time to debate this. The cult is preparing for the final ritual. We need to move soon if we're going to stop them." I nodded, a sense of grim determination settling over me. "Then we go now. How do we get there?" Lyra raised her hand, and a shimmering portal appeared at the edge of the grove. This will take us close to their location. But remember, once we're there, we'll be in hostile territory. The cult will throw everything they have at us to stop us from interfering. As we gathered our things and prepared to step through the portal, Alex grabbed my arm. "Jake, please," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "Don't do this. We'll find another way." I pulled him into a tight hug, fighting back my own tears. "I love you, little brother, more than anything in this world. That's why I have to do this, to give you a chance at a future." Before he could protest further, I stepped through the portal, the grove dissolving around us in a swirl of light. We emerged on the outskirts of the clearing, concealed by a thick copse of trees. The massive portal structure loomed before us, pulsing with dark energy. Cultists swarmed around its base, their chanting rising and falling in an eerie rhythm. "There," Lyra whispered, pointing to a figure standing atop the structure. "That's Evelyn. She's leading the ritual." I gripped my focus stone tightly, feeling its warmth pulse in sync with my racing heart. "What's the plan?" Lyra's eyes scanned the area, assessing the situation. "We need to get you to the base of the portal. From there, you can channel your energy into closing it. Alex and I will hold off the cultists and buy you time." Alex's face was a mask of anguish, torn between the need to stop the cult and his desperation to save me. "Jake, please, one last time. Let me do this instead." I shook my head, managing a small smile. "No can do, little bro, but I need you to promise me something. When this is over, live your life. Be happy. And remember that I'll always be with you, okay?" A sob escaped him as he nodded, unable to speak. I pulled him into one last fierce hug before turning to Lyra. "I'm ready," she nodded solemnly. "Then may the spirits of your ancestors guide you. Go." We burst from our hiding place, sprinting towards the portal. Almost immediately, shouts of alarm rang out. Cultists rushed to intercept us, dark energy crackling at their fingertips. Lyra raised her hands and a wave of force sent the first group of attackers flying. Alex, his face set in grim determination, unleashed a barrage of energy bolts from his focus stone, scattering another group of cultists. I ran straight for the portal, dodging attacks and leaping over obstacles. As I neared the base of the structure, I heard Evelyn's voice ring out above the chaos. "Stop him! Do not let him reach the portal!" A massive cultist loomed in front of me, a wicked-looking blade in his hand. Before I could react, a bolt of energy struck him from behind. I glanced back to see Alex, his hand outstretched, nodding at me. "Go!" he shouted. "I've got your back." With a final burst of speed, I reached the base of the portal. Up close, I could feel the wrongness of it, the way it warped the very fabric of reality around it. Dark energy crackled along its surface, and through the swirling vortex at its center, I caught glimpses of a realm beyond nightmares. Taking a deep breath, I pressed my focus stone against the portal's surface and began to channel my energy into it. The effect was immediate and intense. Pain lanced through my body as I felt my life force being drawn into the portal. Around me, the battle raged. Lyra and Alex fought valiantly, keeping the cultists at bay. But I could hear Evelyn's voice growing louder, her chanting reaching a fever pitch. "Great one," she cried. "The way is open. Come forth and claim this world as your domain." The portal pulsed, and I felt something vast and terrible stirring on the other side. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I poured more of myself into the closing ritual. "Jake!" Alex's voice cut through the chaos. I turned to see him fighting his way towards me, desperation in his eyes. "Jake, stop! We'll find another way." But I knew there was no other way. As my vision began to blur, I saw the portal starting to close, the swirling vortex shrinking. "It's working!" Lyra shouted. "Keep going, Jake!" The pain was beyond anything I'd ever experienced. It felt like every cell in my body was on fire. But as I poured the last of my strength into the ritual, I felt something else too. A sense of peace, of rightness. This was my purpose. This was why I'd been given these powers. To protect my brother. To save our world. As my consciousness began to fade, I heard Alex's anguished cry. "Jake, no." With the last of my strength, I turned to look at him. Our eyes met across the battlefield, and in that moment I tried to convey everything I felt. My love for him, my pride in the man he'd become, my hope for his future. "Live well, little brother," I whispered. And then, with a final surge of energy, I completed the ritual. The portal collapsed in on itself with a deafening roar. A shockwave of power exploded outward, knocking everyone off their feet. As darkness closed in around me, I felt a sense of falling. But I wasn't afraid. I'd done what I needed to do. Alex was safe. Our world was safe. And then, nothing. Alex. The explosion threw me backward, and for a moment, all I could see was a blinding white light. When my vision cleared, I found myself lying on the ground, surrounded by the groans of fallen cultists. I struggled to my feet, my eyes searching frantically for Jake. The portal structure was gone, reduced to a pile of rubble. And there, at its base... "No," I whispered, stumbling forward. "No, no, no." Jake lay motionless among the debris, his focus stone shattered beside him. I fell to my knees at his side, gathering him into my arms. "Jake," I sobbed, shaking him gently. "Jake, please, wake up, you can't leave me, please." But there was no response. His body was limp, his skin already growing cold. I clutched him to my chest, my entire world collapsing around me. Lyra approached slowly, her face etched with sorrow. "Alex," she said softly, "I'm so sorry. He saved us all." I couldn't respond, couldn't do anything but hold my brother and weep. The cult was defeated, the world was saved, but at that moment, none of it mattered. My brother, my protector, my best friend, was gone. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the battlefield, I felt something stir within me. A warmth, a presence that felt achingly familiar. Jake's voice, faint but unmistakable, whispered in my mind. "I'll always be with you, little brother. Always." I gasped, looking up at Lyra with tear-filled eyes. "Did you hear that?" She shook her head, but a small smile played at her lips. "No, but I feel it. His sacrifice. It's changed things. The barriers between worlds are thinner now, but in a different way. A better way." I looked down at Jake's peaceful face, feeling a mix of grief and something else, a sense of purpose, of unfinished business. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. Lyra placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "We honor his sacrifice. We continue the fight, and we find a way to bring him back." I met her gaze, a spark of hope igniting in my chest. "Is that possible?" She nodded slowly. "It won't be easy. It might take years. But if anyone can do it, it's you, Alex. You have a power and a connection to Jake that transcends death itself." I looked back at my brother, feeling a resolve settle over me. Jake had sacrificed everything to save me, to save our world. Now it was my turn to be the protector, the savior. "Then that's what we'll do," I said, gently laying Jake's body down and standing up. "We'll find a way to bring him back, no matter what it takes." As the last light of day faded, I picked up my focus stone, feeling it pulse with a new energy, an energy that felt like a mix of my power and Jake's. Our journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. And somewhere, somehow, I knew Jake was watching over me, guiding me towards our next great adventure. "I'm coming for you, big brother," I whispered to the wind. "Just hold on. I'm coming." The forest pulsed with an otherworldly energy as I stood at the center of the ancient stone altar, the artifact clutched tightly in my trembling hands. Its surface glowed with an eerie blue light, pulsating in rhythm with my racing heartbeat. Around me, the cult members writhed and chanted, their voices a cacophony of madness and desperation. I locked eyes with the cult leader, their form now twisted and monstrous, barely recognizable as human. Tendrils of darkness writhed around them, and their eyes burned with an unholy fire. You cannot hope to stop what has already begun, the leader hissed, their voice a guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The entity will rise and this world will be remade in its image. I gritted my teeth, feeling the artifact's power course through my veins. I won't let that happen, I spat back, my voice surprisingly steady despite the fear threatening to overwhelm me. To my left, my brother struggled against the entity's possession, his face contorted in agony. "Fight it," I yelled to him, hoping to reach whatever part of him remained. "I know you're still in there." The entity's laughter echoed through the clearing, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Your brother is mine now, just as you soon will be," it taunted, using my brother's voice in a sickening parody. I raised the artifact high, its light intensifying. "I channel the power of those who came before," I intoned, reciting words I somehow knew deep in my soul. "I call upon the ancient guardians to aid me in this fight." The ground beneath my feet began to tremble, and the trees around us swayed violently, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. The forest itself seemed to come alive, joining our battle against the encroaching darkness. "You fool!" the cult leader screeched, launching themselves at me with inhuman speed. "You have no idea what forces you're dealing with." I dodged their attack, rolling across the cold stone of the altar. As I regained my footing, I saw my brother lunge at the cult leader, momentarily free from the entity's control. "Leave my sister alone," he roared, grappling with the monstrous figure. Hope surged within me at this sign of his resistance. "Keep fighting, bro," I encouraged him, even as I continued the ritual, my words gaining power with each syllable. The entity's presence grew stronger, the air around us shimmering with its malevolent energy. "Your efforts are futile," it boomed, its voice shaking the very ground. "I have waited eons for this moment. Your world is ripe for the taking." As the entity spoke, visions flashed before my eyes, glimpses of its previous manifestations throughout history. I saw ancient civilizations fall, dark rituals performed in secret chambers, and the insidious influence it had wielded over countless generations. "So that's it," I gasped, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You've been manipulating humanity for centuries, haven't you? This cult, it's just your latest puppet." The cult leader, having thrown off my brother, turned to me with a sneer. "We are the chosen ones," they proclaimed proudly. "We have safeguarded the knowledge of the entity's return, preparing the way for its glorious reign." "You're insane," I shot back, my disgust evident. "You're nothing but pawns in a game you don't even understand." As we argued, the entity's form began to coalesce, a writhing mass of darkness taking shape above the altar. The air crackled with electricity, and the smell of ozone filled my nostrils. I knew I had to act fast. The artifact in my hands grew hot, almost too painful to hold. I locked eyes with my brother, seeing a flicker of recognition in his gaze. "Whatever happens," I told him, my voice thick with emotion, "know that I love you. We're in this together, till the end." He nodded, a tear rolling down his cheek as he fought against the entity's control. "Do what you have to do, sis. I trust you." With a heavy heart, I made my choice. I slammed the artifact down onto the altar, channeling every ounce of my will into it. "By the power of earth and sky, of sacrifice and love," I chanted, my voice rising above the chaos, "I banish this darkness from our world." The artifact shattered, releasing a blinding flash of light that engulfed everything around us. I felt a searing pain course through my body, as if my very essence was being torn apart. In that moment of agony, a long-buried family secret revealed itself to me. Images flashed through my mind. Our parents, standing before this very altar, making a pact with the entity. They had sacrificed their own children, us, binding our fates to this cosmic horror in exchange for power and knowledge. "No!" I screamed, both in pain and denial. "We were meant to be its vessels," the cult leader's laughter rang out. "Now you understand. You were born for this purpose. Embrace your destiny." But their triumph was short-lived. The released energy from the artifact coalesced around my brother and me, forming a protective barrier. I felt a connection to him stronger than ever before, our shared blood and shared fate linking us in this crucial moment. "We make our own destiny," I growled, pushing back against the entity's influence with everything I had. The entity howled in rage and frustration, its partially formed body writhing in the air above us. "You cannot deny your true nature," it roared. "You are mine." But I stood firm, drawing strength from my brother's presence and the power flowing through me. "We are our own," I declared, my voice resonating with a power I didn't know I possessed. "And we choose to fight you." With a final, desperate push, I directed the artifact's energy towards the entity, feeling as if my very soul was being torn from my body. The clearing erupted in a maelstrom of light and shadow, the fabric of reality itself seeming to tear around us. I heard the cult members screaming, saw the leader's monstrous form begin to disintegrate. The entity's inhuman shrieks filled the air as it was forced back, its tendrils of darkness recoiling from the onslaught of purifying light. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. The clearing was silent save for the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. The cult members lay unconscious or dazed around the altar. Of their leader there was no sign. My brother stumbled towards me, his eyes clear and his own once more. Is it over?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I nodded weakly, unable to speak. The weight of what we'd just experienced, of the truths we'd uncovered, settled over us like a heavy blanket. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, I knew that our lives would never be the same. We had faced an ancient evil, uncovered a family legacy steeped in darkness, and emerged forever changed. But as I looked at my brother, seeing the same mix of determination and fear in his eyes that I felt in my heart, I knew we would face whatever came next together. Our ordeal might have ended, but I sensed that our true journey was only just beginning. The forest around us seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the malevolent energy that had permeated it for so long finally dissipating. Yet as I struggled to my feet, leaning on my brother for support, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only won a battle, not the war. The entity's final words echoed in my mind. "You cannot deny your true nature." What did that mean for us? What changes had this encounter wrought upon us? As we prepared to leave the clearing to return to a world that now seemed alien and unfamiliar, I squared my shoulders and took a deep breath. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever consequences our actions here would bring, we would face them head on. For now we had survived. We had protected our world from an unimaginable horror, and in doing so, we had discovered strengths within ourselves that we never knew existed. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the forest floor. It was time to go, to begin the next chapter of our lives. But as we took our first steps away from the altar, I couldn't help but cast one last glance back, wondering what other secrets still lay buried in the depths of this ancient, mysterious forest. The sun had barely crested the horizon when we stumbled out of the forest, our clothes torn and dirty, our bodies battered and bruised. The events of the night felt like a surreal dream, but the aches in my muscles and the haunted look in my brother's eyes told me it had all been terrifyingly real. As we emerged from the tree line, I took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. "We made it," I whispered, more to myself than to my brother. He nodded silently, his gaze still distant. After a moment he spoke, his voice hoarse. "What do we do now?" I shook my head, feeling the weight of our ordeal settling on my shoulders. "I don't know, but we can't just go back to our normal lives, not after what we've seen, what we've learned." We trudged back to our car, parked at the trailhead where our hike had begun just days ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. As I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the car window. My eyes widened in shock. "Hey!" I called to my brother. "Look at this." He came over and we both stared at our reflections. Our eyes, once a mundane brown, now shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence. Flecks of gold and violet danced in our irises, a stark reminder of the supernatural forces we'd encountered. "What's happening to us?" my brother asked, his voice tinged with fear. I shook my head. "I don't know, but I think we've changed. More than just our eyes." As if on cue, a sudden gust of wind whipped around us. For a brief moment I felt connected to it, as if I could control its direction, its intensity. I gasped, stumbling back. "Did you feel that?" I asked. My brother nodded, his eyes wide. "I thought I was imagining it. Earlier when we were walking, I could have sworn I heard the trees, whispering." We stood there in silence for a moment, grappling with the implications of our newfound abilities. Finally I spoke. "We need to figure this out. But first, we need to rest. Let's find a motel." As we drove away from the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were leaving a part of ourselves behind. The adrenaline of our ordeal was wearing off, leaving room for the full weight of what we'd experienced to settle in. We found a small motel on the outskirts of town and checked in, ignoring the strange looks from the receptionist at our disheveled appearance. Once in our room, we collapsed onto the beds, exhaustion overtaking us. Hours later, I awoke with a start, images from our encounter still fresh in my mind. My brother was already up, staring out the window. "We need to go back," he said without turning around. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "Back? To the cabin?" He nodded. There are still so many unanswered questions about the cult, about our parents, about us. I knew he was right. As much as I wanted to put it all behind us, to pretend it had never happened, I knew we couldn't. We were part of something bigger now, whether we liked it or not. "Okay," I agreed, "but we need to be careful. We don't know what's waiting for us there." We gathered what little supplies we had and headed back to the forest. The drive was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. As we approached the trailhead, I felt a strange pull, as if the forest itself was calling to us. The hike back to the cabin seemed shorter this time, our feet finding the path with an uncanny certainty. When we finally reached the clearing, I gasped. The cabin, once dilapidated and foreboding, had transformed. The walls stood straight and strong, the roof intact. It looked renewed. "How is this possible?" my brother whispered. I shook my head in disbelief. "I don't know, but I think it's reacting to us." We approached cautiously, half expecting cultists to jump out at any moment. But the clearing was silent, save for the rustling of leaves in the wind. As we reached the front door, it swung open of its own accord, inviting us in. The interior had changed as well. Gone were the cobwebs and dust. Instead, the cabin looked lived in, comfortable even. Books lined the shelves, their spines bearing titles in languages I didn't recognize. Strange symbols were carved into the wooden beams overhead, pulsing faintly with an inner light. "It's like it's been waiting for us," I murmured, running my hand along a shelf. My brother nodded, picking up a book. "Look at this," he said, flipping it open. It's about us. Our family." I peered over his shoulder, my eyes widening as I saw drawings of people who looked eerily like our parents, our grandparents. This is our legacy, I realized. The cult, the entity, it's all tied to our bloodline. We spent hours poring over the books, uncovering secrets that had been hidden for generations. We learned of our ancestors' pact with the entity, of the power that ran through our veins. But we also discovered tales of those who had fought against the darkness, who had used their abilities for good. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the cabin windows, I turned to my brother. "We have a choice to make," I said solemnly. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We can't ignore this. We can't pretend it didn't happen." "No," I agreed, "but we can choose how to use what we've been given. We can choose to fight the darkness to protect others from what we've experienced." A small smile played on my brother's lips. Sounds like we're signing up to be supernatural vigilantes. I couldn't help but chuckle. I guess we are, but we can't do it alone. There must be others out there like us, other families with similar legacies. We need to find them. As if in response to my words, one of the books on the shelf began to glow. I pulled it out, opening it to find a map. Dots of light pulsed at various points across the country, each one I somehow knew, representing others with abilities like ours. Looks like we've got our work cut out for us, my brother said, peering at the map. I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. This is just the beginning, isn't it? He put a hand on my shoulder. Yeah, but we're in this together. Whatever comes next, we face it as a team. As we prepared to leave the cabin, now a base of operations for our newfound mission, I couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose I'd never experienced before. The world was bigger, stranger, and more dangerous than we'd ever imagined. But we were no longer the same people who had stumbled upon this cabin just days ago. We were changed, empowered, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As we stepped out into the gathering darkness, our eyes glowing with newfound power, I knew that our true adventure was only just beginning. The forest seemed to whisper its approval as we made our way back to the car. The trees swayed gently, almost as if they were waving goodbye. I felt a connection to this place now, a bond that I knew would draw us back time and time again. You know, my brother said as we reached the car, we're going to need to come up with some sort of cover story. We can't exactly tell people we're off fighting supernatural entities. I laughed, the sound strange and almost foreign after everything we'd been through. What, you don't think supernatural vigilantes will go over well on job applications? He grinned, some of his old humor returning. Probably not. Ghost hunters, maybe? Paranormal investigators, I suggested, only half joking. It's not too far from the truth. As we drove away from the forest, the weight of our new reality settled over us. We had abilities we didn't fully understand, knowledge of threats most people couldn't even imagine, and a legacy that stretched back generations. It was overwhelming, terrifying even. But as I glanced at my brother, saw the determination in his eyes that matched my own, I felt a surge of hope. We'd faced unimaginable horrors and come out the other side. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The road stretched out before us, leading to destinations unknown. But for the first time since this all began, I felt ready. Ready to learn, to grow, to fight. Our ordeal in the forest had ended, but our journey was just beginning. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, I couldn't help but feel that somewhere out there, others like us were looking up at those same stars, perhaps only now awakening to their own hidden legacies. We had a lot to learn, a lot to discover about ourselves and the hidden world we were now a part of. But we also had a purpose, a mission, to protect, to understand, to balance the scales between light and dark. As we drove into the night, leaving the forest and its secrets behind, I realized that we were no longer just siblings on a hiking trip. We were guardians, chosen by forces beyond our understanding, tasked with a duty that would shape the rest of our lives. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but I was ready to face it. We both were. And somewhere deep inside, in that place where our newfound power resided, I felt a flicker of excitement for the adventures that awaited us. Our story didn't end in that forest. In many ways, it was only just beginning. Our ordeal in the forest had ended, but our journey was just beginning. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, I couldn't help but feel that somewhere out there, others like us were looking up at those same stars, perhaps only now awakening to their own hidden legacies. We had a lot to learn, a lot to discover about ourselves and the hidden world we were now a part of, but we also had a purpose, a mission, to protect, to understand, to balance the scales between light and dark. As we drove into the night, leaving the forest and its secrets behind, I realized that we were no longer just siblings on a hiking trip. We were guardians, chosen by forces beyond our understanding, tasked with a duty that would shape the rest of our lives. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but I was ready to face it. We both were. And somewhere deep inside, in that place where our newfound power resided, I felt a flicker of excitement for the adventures that awaited us. Our story didn't end in that forest. In many ways, it was only just beginning.